have some secret stuff to attend to first.
Nadie sabía lo que iba a pasar. Solamente fuiste y me dejaste solito en la eternidad. Señora, ay señorita, yo sé que ahora estás lejos de mí. Siempre estoy pensando lo que estás haciendo. Y si te sientes más feliz, y si te sientes más feliz, oye. Y espero yo que no te sientas sola y que tu vida está llena de felicidad. Porque deseo que nadie tenga que sentirse ahora mismo como yo, atrapado en la oscuridad, solito en la eternidad, solito en la eternidad, oye. Trompeta.
Thank you so much for the membership. It means the world.
Oye, señora, vuélvete acá. Ven acá, mi amor. Estoy perdido en la eternidad. Es la verdad, es la verdad.
I think you guys are going to be happy with what's about to happen. I think.
Ahora sí, camina para allá. Saxofón.
What's your account? Well, that is something else, but it's not happening today. But I think we're doing it. He has such a weird setup though, which we'll talk about. Súbelo.
Ay, señora, vuélvete acá. Ay, ¿por qué me dejaste? Solamente fuiste. Ay, ven acá, señora. Ay, ven acá. Ay, ven, señora. Mira, y espero yo que no te sientas sola y que tu vida está llena de felicidad, porque deseo que nadie tenga que sentirse ahora mismo como yo, atrapado en la oscuridad y solito en la eternidad. Ay, señora, vuélvete acá, vuélvete. Ay, señora, ya se fue.
All right, almost ready to go. It's better. Road is better. Hope you can hear it. Birthright subscriptions. Oh no, send me the Ryan thing. Actually, I can find it. Don't worry, I'll find it. I would love to review that. Yeah, sure. When we're done with the secret memes, you can ask me that.
buttons actually work today.
Oh,
Everybody should be on screen. Before the fireworks start, though, I want to make a bit of an announcement. Laid Back Law, last episode I had on was Black Friday of 2025, last November, and that was literally the 5th anniversary of the first panel I had done, which was called Black Friday, F-R-E-I-D-A-Y, Viva Fry, and Robert Barnes, and then overtime with Nate, with others, Good Logic, whatnot. I've been doing panels essentially for 5 years. And hold on, I hear myself in the background, which is going to make my brain explode. That's on me. All right, cool. Essentially, what is happening now, it was through multiple channels. It was the Eric Hunley channel, then spun it off to a second channel, which became Layback News, which became Layback Law, which is now Layback Law. During this time, there was another channel on the side, which is called Nate and Eric. A lot of people really enjoyed Nate Eric. We had a great time doing it. Nate and I talk on the phone damn near every day. We get in trouble with our spouses sometimes for our phone calls, but we've been missing doing Nate and Eric, and we like doing Laid Back Law, so they're getting married. Laid Back Law is now essentially Nate and Eric's Laid Back Law. So, Nate, any words? Woo! You're the new boss here.
I don't know if I'm the new boss, but it's, you know what? It's going to be interesting. So I do want to say one thing. We got to give a shout out to this sponsor for this stream, and that's ZocDoc. So let's do it. Sponsor ZocDoc. Okay, raise your hand if you've been putting off doctor's appointments, dental cleanings, annual checkups, eye exam. Yeah, my hand's raised too. When something feels off, I'll Google it. Then I'll tell myself it's probably fine.
Wait, hold on, Dad. Isn't that the reason why you was in the hospital with a brain tumor? Because you were waiting so long.
Good point. But that's why I present to you ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love. We're talking about more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states. Whether you're looking for dermatology, dentistry, primary care, eye care, or one of the 200-plus specialties, you can search by specialty or symptom and build a care team that's right for you. Want to see your doctor in person? Great. Prefer a video visit? You can do that too. You can read thousands of verified patient reviews, see real-time availability, and book instantly. No phone tag, no waiting around. Appointments through ZocDoc happen fast, typically within 24 to 72 hours, and you can even score same-day appointments. Now, I use ZocDoc, and so should you. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/Nate the Lawyer to find and instantly book a doctor that you would love today. That's ZocDoc.com/Nate the Lawyer. Link is in the description and the pinned comment.
Thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message. Now, back to the video.
Amazing.
All right,
so cute.
I love the spokesperson there.
So cute.
Nate's daughter. By the way, those who are watching on the Nate the Lawyer channel who are confused right now, we've been literally doing this for years with Nate showing up on Laid Back Law, and we're doing it on the Nate the Lawyer channel so people can be introduced to the channel. Again, it's a partnership with Nate and myself, and we will be cutting the stream at, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, and rolling over into the Laid Back Law stream. There's a link in the description. Please consider clicking, coming over, watching the whole stream, and most importantly, if and only if you actually like it, please subscribe. If you don't like it, don't subscribe. That doesn't help anybody. But if you do like it, hit the like, subscribe, all that. Want to get into today's guests. Pisco, you've been here before, so I'm going to pass by you and then come back to you. Ryan C. Mullally has never been a part of the legal panel before. He's brand new. He was introduced to me by Potentially Criminal, also known as LawTube Sean on X. And Sean has been on Laid Back Law a bunch and Legal Fridays a bunch. So Ryan, tell us about yourself.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm Ryan Mullally. I'm a litigator, and I've done, I think, at this point, basically every level of the U.S. court system, including the U.S. Supreme Court. And I started doing legal commentary online in the vain hope that I might be able to contribute something to the discourse. Part of it was my feeling that, there's kind of a moral obligation on some level, because tricky issues, First Amendment issues, stuff like this nature, if lawyers aren't explaining what's really happening, I don't think the information's getting out there. So I have a baby but growing YouTube channel, Natural Law with Ryan Mullally. Be delighted if any of you wanted to stop by. And actually just did a big debate with Pisco live in Atlantic City on the Word War debate platform, which was a lot of fun. So Pisco and I are old buddies, or at least frenemies.
Isn't that where Anna destroyed Pearl Davis?
Oh yes.
Yes. I was like, my God. It's like
Yes.
Michael Jordan versus JoJo English. It was like cremation. It was like total disaster.
It went the way we predicted it would go. Let's put it that way. But if you want to see the best debate of the night, I think me and Pisco was the best debate of the night, and you can see it on either of our channels. I think we both have it up now, and the audio was a little scuffed at the beginning, but Pisco and I fixed it on our respective channels. So you can listen to it with the correct audio so you can hear all our genius points.
All right. And the man of the hour, Pisco, who has been on before, things got a little bit hectic, got a little bit heated, which sometimes does happen with Pisco. He's a passionate guy. I'm sure that it's going to be a much more dignified show today, though, right? How are you doing, Pisco?
I'm doing well. I'm coming off of a little bit of like a sickness. So I got something from these Word War debate people. I don't know if it was one of the Proud Boys that was there, or maybe it was one of the producers or something. But I expect my response to be much more dignified. I do want to say though, I love the Laid Back Law channel. I love watching you guys enjoy and have fun, and I'm so glad and so happy to see Nate up and about, looking great, and doing those spots, and that makes me really happy. With that little scare that we had, keeping an eye on it and everything. But yeah, I just wanted to, shout out Laid Back Law and shout out Nate the lawyer.
Thanks, bro, and my fellow New Yorkers.
Hell yeah.
We
gotta get some pizza sometime.
Whoa. Is this like a New York panel?
Yo.
No.
Let me do this. Let me get down to the ground rules. Ground rules are we're going to just talk. But if the talking begins where we're starting to cut each other off so nobody can be understood, we go into battle mode. Now, battle mode means you have a speaking stick, and each participant will have about 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes to make their point uninterrupted. And if anyone else wants to talk, respond, hopefully you'll write down your points or remember what you want to say, and then they're able to respond. So we'll go free flow, and then if we go battle mode, then we will do it. Now, for those of you, so we have 2 legal issues we're going to discuss today. Number 1, we'll answer the majority. We'll talk either about the case in Minnesota with the Ms. Good shooting, whether it was justified or unjustified, and we'll answer. What I've done is I've run my last video on the topic got over 1 million views, and so I had AI run through the comments and have the 10 biggest misconceptions about that case, whether the officer was hit, all those type of questions and things that are controversial. And I wanted to bring people on who had different opinions about the case, and we also have the video ready to go. The second case we're going to talk about is the transgender athletes case, because I think there's a lot of confusion about what's going on. There's multiple things that are happening at that Supreme Court level, and we've had the cases briefed. So I'll ask the panel, what case do you want to do first? You want to do Minnesota shooting, or should we start with the Supreme Court trans case?
Let's do the Minnesota. That'd be my preference. That's what I most have been talking about lately. I'm in the mood for it. Yesterday, I just had or maybe 2 days ago at this point, a conversation with Chud Logic regarding it, and I think that it'll be fun to talk about.
Pisco, you have a hot take on something? That's crazy. I never would have thought.
I think, well, no, if you check the polls, I have the majority view take, at least by polling.
Well, just so we're clear, I think 52 or 60% of Americans. So it's a definitely majority believe the shooting was unjustified. Mm-hmm. So majority of Americans believe the shooting was unjustified. I think that was YouGov. It's not, and a minority, I think 30% believe the shooting was justified. Like 20% was like unsure.
Right. So I think you guys have the hot takes, to be honest.
Yeah. Well.
No, we have the correct takes.
Whether they're correct or not, they're hot. That's all I'm saying.
Statutes and stuff.
So now let's do this. I'm assuming if you're watching this show and you don't know what happened in Minnesota, then I don't know what to tell you, right? It's like It's like welcome up from your coma. But what happened? Renee Goodwin was shot and killed by an ICE officer as she was trying to inhibit their progress down a public road. She parked the car in the middle, and unfortunately, things progressed, and the officer fired. I can play the video of what happened if you guys think that'll be helpful, or should we just go into the misconceptions?
I've seen the video. I think the video might just be helpful context just to ground us.
Okay, so let me just play the video so we can all see what happened. So, it's funny. I had all this stuff propped up, and now, oh, that's the wrong one. All right, so here is a quick video on what happened. So I'm going to do, this is without commentary, and this is a side-by-side view so we can all just see it, and then we can discuss what we see. And if we want to have things slowed down or whatever, we can also do that too. So downloads.
Doing it live, folks. Doing it live.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the video because I don't want to pull up one of the videos that have anyone's
commentary. Yeah. Unless you mute it. I mean, I guess technically you could play video and mute. And
a surprising amount of LawTube content is just lawyers struggling with technology, which, by the way,
speak to yourself.
It's also a surprising amount of the practice of law is lawyers.
That is absolutely true. So that is 100% true.
This is authenticity right here.
Yes. In practice, I can't tell you the amount of and this is someone who, when I practiced, I was a junior associate, junior, just like PDF management type stuff that associates are being paid extraordinary amounts or exorbitant amounts of money for.
I can't tell you how many times I sent something like an Excel to a partner I will not name, who would be like, I don't know
what is this. I don't open this.
Like, oh, okay, yeah, got it. Word only.
Here we go. So I have it lined up. So this is after the stop, because I think we all know why she's there. We all know what's going on. So this is from the stop. We have on the left side the officer's handheld, the officer with the
phone,
with the cell phone video, and on the right side we have the bystander who was seeing it from the opposite side. And these videos have been linked together. So here we go.
You want to come at us? You want to come at us? I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead.
Out of the car. Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the car.
Oh! Just play it again, just one more second.
You want to come at us? I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead.
Out of the car. Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the car.
Oh! Okay, so now that's essentially what happened. Now let's go to, let me close that and let's do misconception. So first thing that most people, again, this is just pulled up. So the critique is that critics argue that because the woman was only blocking traffic, that lethal force was widely disproportionate response to this trivial offense. So what say you guys?
I've got a stance on that because that is a claim. There's a lot of stuff that I'm covering about Oklahoma City, Ruby Ridge, Gordon Call, a lot of things in the past, which, kind of come from the right wing dissonant side, if you will. But there's for example, a lot of claims. Let's just do a hypothetical situation. Joe Smith refused to pay taxes. And Joe Smith said, I'm not going to pay taxes. Screw you. Never pay taxes, never pay taxes, da, 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 da. And so they go to visit his house. The marshals or whomever, go to have a visit. And he then pulls out a gun and threatens the marshals with the gun. A melee occurs. This person is shot dead. There are a lot of people who would say, well, his only crime is he didn't pay taxes. And they want to ignore the lead up to, well, wait a minute here. They went out to see him. He escalated this situation. And I think that is a similar thing here. Oh, her only crime was blocking traffic. Yes. But then when the police went, or not police, sorry, ICE agents, I've been through this argument before, so I'll just say LEO, went to tell her, hey, stop, get out of the car. She in turn escalated the situation at that point. That's my opinion. Next up.
So
I
go ahead,
sorry,
Ryan.
go ahead, Pisco. I think this goes back to what Nate was saying with the poll question, which is, as I understood it, was, is the shooting justified? And that it's an ambiguous question because legal justification and moral justification are two different things. And when people say, like, oh, obstructing justice the way she was obstructing justice, which is I think what they technically would have charged her with, doesn't rise to the level of lethal force, they're making a moral argument. And I think they're actually making a good moral argument. They're saying, like, if that's all that the story was, this would seem intuitively to be excessive. But of course, the legal justification question is not about that. It's about what Eric was talking about, which is, in the moment when this action took place, subjectively and objectively, did the officer, I forgot the exact terminology, Pisco might have it off the top of his head, fear for his life? Was there lethal force that was being projected against him under both those standards? And that's a totally different question. So for me personally, I watch that video and I say, God, that rubs me the wrong way. Like I don't like watching that, and I think it tugs on my heartstrings in a way that I find problematic. But that's a very different question than should the officer be legally responsible. And separating those two, I think, is critical just to make sure you're on all fours with the case law.
There's some aspects that I agree with and disagree with what you guys said. I guess the first thing that I agree with is that the previous accused crime isn't dispositive about whether a use of force is justified legally. On that, totally agree. But the case law, from Graham v. Connor, Tennessee v. Gardner, tells us that the sort of nature of the initial reason the cops are there, that's part of the totality of circumstances. Graham itself, says the severity of the crime relates to the use of force. And so I think we need to be very precise what we're saying here. Yes, it's relevant. The nature of the crime that there would have been probable cause to stop and detain her over. And I'm assuming that the DHS does have authority to arrest these individuals. I think that we've seen a lot of like people saying they didn't even have authority to initiate an arrest. I don't think that that's true. I think the INA probably explicitly gives them authority to make stops of crimes that they see in front of them. And I think they probably would have cast it in terms differently than obstructing traffic and more obstruction of, the enforcement of immigration law or something. But strictly speaking, what she is accused of and what they saw her do before is, of course, highly relevant to the totality of circumstances. And that's a direct holding from on point SCOTUS law.
I think we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah. So this is my write-up. Under Graham v. Connor, the severity of the crime is only one factor. The law prioritizes an immediate threat at the moment the force was used. Once the car moves toward an officer, the initial reason for the stop legally is secondary to the threat of the vehicle at the time the force was used. But then obviously there's a lot of, I want to make it very clear, there's a lot of context to that, right? Because we're getting to the end. But that's essentially what I think we're all saying. Are we all in agreement to that?
Yeah.
Relevant, but not dispositive, and not as important in this case as the conduct of the woman, the conduct of the officers, and of course the car.
Yeah, and it's an evolving set of facts, right? Like if you imagine a traffic stop, which is like the quintessential fact pattern, like for a speeding ticket or something, that's the most benign use of like police.
Let's talk about a traffic stop for a second, because I think it's actually a kind of a good example the other way. Because the number of times that what is seemingly a routine traffic stop goes from 0 to 100 because the guy in the car decides to, without any rhyme or reason that can be observed, pull out a gun or do other incredibly insane thing, like would just blow your mind. So the initial reason is speeding. The initial reason is broken tail light. It's like, but that's not how it ended. And that's a very strong reality.
Yeah, and it puts officers in the position of having to make very, very difficult decisions in very short time frames. Like to the hypo you were given. Let's say it's a traffic stop, and suddenly, and this was addressed in I think Kavanaugh's concurrence in Barnes, the guy just starts pulling off and at high speed. There's a variety of things the officer could do there that are going to either attempt to stop the person from leaving, take down their plate, and all of them have various levels of risks to the officer and various levels of risk to the community. And those decisions have to be made in a second, half a second, so the way the law is structured, at least on my understanding, is an attempt to be understanding that there needs to be limits on the outer perimeter of officers' decision making, and also understanding that decision making will not be perfect in these scenarios, and we do need law enforcement officers to be able to engage in these scenarios because that's their job.
Okay, so are we 100% in agreement? I just want to make sure that the ICE agents did have, I'll say, probable cause or authority to stop the vehicle, ask her to get out of the vehicle, and I'll just say detain, not arrest, just to detain her temporarily. Do we all agree that at that point, early on, that they had this particular authority?
I'm not going to doubt it. I think it's a very strong likelihood that they did have this authority. And I want to, and this relates both to the issue you brought up right now about the crime and the issue of, do they even have authority to make the stop? I want to encourage people on both sides, the left and the right, to avoid looking for like a simple answer that just immediately resolves everything. You need to go through the morass. You need to go through the objectively reasonable tests by the Supreme Court and actually look at the totality of circumstances. And it's not enough, even if it were the case that they didn't have authority, which I think they almost certainly did. It's not enough to say that, because even if they didn't, right? You guys know in the main course of traffic stops and, even warrants and stuff, or any kind of, pulling you over, there can be illegal conduct by officers, and it doesn't give you the right to, evade them. It doesn't give you necessarily the right to try to like get away or anything like that. So, I agree with that.
Caveat, With one caveat, in some states, you can resist an unlawful arrest,
but it's a high burden usually.
There are some states you can do that, which I was kind of shocked.
Let's not overcomplicate this.
Yeah, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but I just don't want to.
In general,
you'll get people in the comments. Oh my, I can't do that crap. All right.
But I'm just saying, in general, the fact of illegality isn't going to cause us to just like resolve automatically the self-defense issue in one side. And so on that score, I agree with you both on the probable question of authority, but also on the broader question of like, even if it weren't the case, I'm not sure that resolves it in favor of the decedent.
Okay, and I just wanted to ask those questions. I think it's important on the way that we have little guideposts saying, okay, everybody agrees here. This is where they diverge. I just think it makes it a cleaner question to do that. And this is just a side note, but all the lawyers here on the panel, would you not advise, whether the authority is questionable or not, if you are in the situation where the police tell you, stop, get out of the car, or whatever it is, cooperate, and then when you go to court, you can argue it out all you want. But in the time of the encounter, it would probably be advisable to cooperate with the police and not escalate the situation.
I mean, 100%. And I think this actually does need to be said, because we have a rich history of civil disobedience in this country. And civil disobedience is part of the First Amendment. It's part of our protest culture. It is an important part of American politics. That said, if you're engaging in certain types of civil disobedience, like, for example, blocking traffic, especially blocking law enforcement, you should probably expect to be arrested. And when you are arrested, you shouldn't try to fight the cops. You shouldn't try to push them off. This is going to create both physical and legal jeopardy for you above and beyond the political statement that you were making. And it could legitimately ruin your life. Like even if you aren't harmed in the arrest, suddenly a small charge could turn into a large obstruction of justice charge, assaulting a federal officer type charge. And now your whole life could be impacted by this. So yes, I think there are corner cases we could talk about, but in 99% of situations, if a law enforcement officer gives you an order, comply. You're better off fighting this late down the road.
I do want to make one or 2 points before we go further. Miss Good was not a domestic terrorist. I don't care what you're hearing. I don't care anything like that. She was not a domestic terrorist, and people need to stop saying that, because it only poisons this whole thing even more. She was someone out there who was doing what she believed that this could have been the civil rights movement. She's doing something she believes it was helping the country, even though whoever may disagree. I think labeling her a domestic terrorist is the wrong framing here, right? So
agree.
I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah. No, I want to associate myself positively with Ryan's comment there, but with a big caveat, which is, well, first I'll just say, yes, it's true. And you want your lawyer to suss out all the illegalities and all that stuff after, you're out of that situation. And you don't want to rely on these like poorly trained bozo, moonlighting Proud Boys who they're hiring in ICE to just like have your best interest at heart. But the big caveat is a political one, unfortunately, and that is what the administration is doing with respect to their training and with respect to their insistence on having these masked people without any identification and some of these practices. I know the justification.
Can we just do a legal analysis? I don't want to get into politics.
Oh, sure. I'm just saying it's important also for the police to keep their side of the bargain and to make sure that they're respecting the rights and the prerogatives of law enforcement.
I want to go. Let's go to number 2. So number 2, here is now I'm going to give both sides of the argument. The critics will say that argue that this shooting. So this section is about policy violations versus criminal statutes. Critics are now saying on Twitter and online that the shooting violated DHS and ICE internal policy prohibiting firing at moving vehicles and prohibiting officers from standing in moving vehicles. The counter to that is that policy is not law. An officer can be fired for violating the policy while remaining constitutionally reasonable under the standards for Graham v. Connor.
Also, that there are exceptions. There are also exceptions to the policy listed.
But I'm saying just even without the exceptions, just as a general rule. And then an example is the chokehold ban for the Eric Gardner case in New York. For those of you who don't know who the Eric Gardner case, he was choked by an NYPD officer for selling loose cigarettes. The policy said, NYPD said you can't use chokeholds. They were going to prosecute him. But the fact that he did use a chokehold to effectuate arrest wasn't illegal. So he was fired from the NYPD, but he was not prosecuted criminally for the policy violation. So critics, so one side is saying because he violated policy, this is now a murder. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I agree with you that policy is not law. It might be something that gets brought up in a trial, but the policy is not the law. But also, I mean, I haven't looked at that policy in a while, but my recollection, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the language is along the lines of you don't fire at a vehicle solely to prevent it from moving, right?
I think you can get into whether or not it's a violation. I just don't think it's worth having the argument.
Yeah,
I think it's highly relevant for the legal issue. I agree with Ryan.
I mean, I'll just concede it's a policy violation so I can move on to the next step.
Sure.
But let's see what Pisco says, though.
Yeah. So I totally agree with Ryan that policy in that respect doesn't decide what the law is. And lefties, you have to really put yourself in the following situation, right? Imagine that Kristi Noem writes some crazy policy. You would never say, well, because the executive branch writes the policy, it becomes a law. So you really have to agree with Ryan that the policy is not necessarily law. Now, distinguish that in your head from other areas of like agency law where the executive like literally makes law. So this isn't quite like that. But the reason why it's highly relevant is because, as was done in the Chauvin trial, what the policies are informs what an objectively reasonable officer would do. I don't say it decides it, but it informs what they're trained with, what expert testimony will ultimately say. Probably is all coming from the same pattern of observations and fact, which inform the policy, which has to do about best practices. And the reason they're best practices, I'm presuming, right, that they're not just a random policy, is because they are attempts to try to minimize bad things and maximize good things. And so it's relevant insofar as the meat and potatoes of the evidentiary case, that what was done here was or was not objectively reasonable.
Yeah, it's a jury issue ultimately, right? Like this is the sort of thing that the jury would consider when determining whether or not the officer's conduct met the various tests. It would be one factor amongst the totality. Oh, Sean's here. What up, Sean? The totality of the circumstances.
But now I do want to bring this up. So everybody, we've been talking about Graham v. Connor. So I just want to let the audience understand where we're at with this, right? So this is the objectively reasonable test from Graham v. Connor. And that test is an objective standard used to judge an officer's actions. Under this standard, a particular application of force must be judged through the perspective of a reasonable officer, not the officer at the scene, but a reasonable officer, facing the same set of circumstances without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, and be based on the totality of the facts that are known to that officer at the time the force was used. And in the case, they do give us 3 factors. For instance, the nature of the 911 call, whether the subject was resisting arrest, and whether the subject is a serious threat to you officers or other members of the community. And these are 3
non-exhaustive, yes, exactly.
Instance, if you have 10 officers and 1 subject who's unarmed, then that also would be for play. But this is what we're talking about. So when we keep quoting the objectively reasonable test, this is the test that we're talking about from Graham v. Connor.
And from Tennessee v. Gardner, which is an earlier case as well. But yeah.
Well, Tennessee v. Gardner actually was, I don't want to say this was.
Oh, shit. You have it. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
Of course he does.
So Tennessee v. Gardner was the initial case. You can't shoot fleeing felons in the back. That's where that came from. But that gave us our imminent serious threat analysis, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't shoot a fleeing felon in the back unless they're a serious threat to another officer or serious members of the community, blah, 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 blah. And then that's the fleeing felon rule you'll hear people say. But there was rolled into Graham v. Connor as a factor in objectively reasonable. So that's kind of how the 2 cases kind of.
And I think it's important to note that the Supreme Court has made it clear that under Graham v. Connor, they weren't trying to put out a kind of like, you have to meet the 3 things, oftentimes right. And
hey, this is a fair request, by the way, the super chat, and you guys can't help with that. Superseding versus intervening, please discuss for lays like me, lay people. That would be helpful.
Did someone say superseding? So
in what context? It's
okay. Well, I thought somebody was when you were rattling off the different cases.
I'm not sure what relevance is. I kind of will sometimes view those as more or less equivalent. Maybe they're different though.
Eric, you want to
no dots connected for me? Sorry.
Before we move
hold on. What?
Do you want to knock off a couple of these super chats before we move on?
We could do that, and I think should be transferring over to the Laidback Law channel. What do you think? Hopefully, folks follow us. If you do nothing, you should be relocated on your own. If you're just watching on Nate the Lawyer, you should drift over automatically, but who knows? There's a link there. It would be helpful if you did. We do appreciate it. Again, this is something we should be doing every Friday, and I hope you all consider joining the channel.
Sub to the channel. Sub to it.
Only if you like it, though. I mean, honestly, if you hate it, then don't. We don't want to do that to anybody.
Trust me, I
see
know,
you soon.
I know looking at this list, this conversation is going to get spicy real soon. So go ahead and do some super chats before we start wrestling with each other in here.
All right. So hopefully everybody will be heading over there. And it does say have go now. So let's see how that goes. All right, cool. I don't know where we left off. I think you showed this earlier on the screen. Elizabeth Warren just asked me to donate to the Democrats' Fight Fund. I thought fight meant you were inciting insurrection. I am confused. So it's okay to fight if it's for Dems, but don't fight any other time. I think it's rhetorically saying fight. In fairness, people on the right are annoyed that, Trump said, fight patriotically and whatever, and they're saying it's the call for violence. We can apply it both directions. I think it's a rhetorical device. Fight with your money, fight with your vote, fight with your voice. But anyway,
I just want to say one quick comment on that. I think, like these self-defense cases, the test for the insurrection is very fact specific, and so it's going to be totality of the circumstances there. And so there's no bright line rule about fight never is incitement or is always incitement. And people are trying to find these bright lines when it's very, very fact dependent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, everything in the universe is technically fact dependent.
I agree.
If you break it down.
Yeah, but when you go online though, everybody's like, "I found the skill shot that's going to break the case."
Yeah.
Like, no.
Well, that part of the problem there is, the first thing you said when you go online, right? Like, in 280, it's hard to think in paragraphs when you're typing in 280 characters, right? So that is what it is.
All right, this is saying great debate between Pisco and Ryan on word war. Too bad Pearl won.
She didn't win. She didn't win.
Well played. Well, Pearl just looked like she's.
I think it was worse than the Joe Biden debate. I think
the Joe Biden debate.
Nothing could be worse than the Joe
it's
Biden
pretty
debate,
brutal,
but
bro.
it
It's
was
up there.
in the Hall of Fame of those
It's
up
debates.
there.
What I saw of that, and I only saw like a couple clips, is she reminded me of the student in the classroom who got called on.
Yep.
And they
Yep.
just said some shit out of their mouth, and then there was a follow-up question, and she just
And
froze and waited for everybody to go away.
it was like the
This isn't
Fetterman
about
debate.
This isn't about like who's right or who's wrong, but like, as anybody who stood up in court or had to do public speaking before, the light's on you, it's your turn to talk. That's a skill set and an attitude, and you have to do it a lot to be good at it.
Sure.
I think that it's not for everybody, and not everybody likes doing it. And honestly, when I was watching her, she seemed nervous. Like she seemed like she had some stage fright and she was freezing up, which is tough to watch. You know, your awkwardness dar goes off. Like when you're watching a sitcom and you're like, I can't watch this anymore. You're turning away. So
and different people have different, like, better debate formats too. Some people really are good at like the Piers Morgan style, where you don't have a lot of time and where you kind of have to bring Piers Morgan in. Adam Mockler is like very effective on that. And there are a couple right wingers who are also very effective on Piers Morgan in terms of getting their points out. Scott, who's this guy who goes on CNN? He can be quite effective in these little.
Oh, Scott's great.
Scott Jennings. But they can fall apart in a kind of more longer form or standing up debate. And so there are some people who shouldn't be doing any of this, and there are some people who have different formats which their natural talents are better at.
Yeah.
No, definitely. All right. So let me see more super chats, and we do appreciate the love. Thank you very much. This is Sulo, whatever. I don't know how to say it. Do prosecutors generally refrain from charging until they have enough evidence that a jury would likely convict, or is it enough that they think they have enough to avoid a JNBO?
Really depends
beyond a reasonable doubt.
It depends what prosecutor's office you're talking about. If you're asking about like the nitty gritty, like I did some work with the Southern District of New York prosecutor's office, and like I can't speak for every lawyer in that office, but the ones I worked with, like if they brought a case, they had it. If they brought a case, they had it. They thought they were like 90 plus that they were going to win at trial, right?
Well, that's the feds, right?
That used to be it.
I was at the Bronx DA's office. In the Bronx DA's office, you bring. I think they had like 50% if they went to trial, but they had like an 80% conviction rate if you counted in plea bargains. But a lot of the times, only thing you need is probable cause to either bring an indictment, and that's the ethical standard too. If you don't have probable cause to bring the case, then you may have some ethics issues too in New York.
But the DOJ officially is supposed to have like a higher standard than that, and that's been their overall.
For the DOJ, that's why there's conviction rates 99
is much higher. Yes.
Let me get to number 3 here. So now let's move on to the big issue about who did the officer create the danger in himself. So one side is saying commentators argued that the officer created his own danger by moving himself into a blocking position in front of the car. On the other side, they say the video shows the officer was in a static position and the vehicle became dynamic, maneuvering and turning that position, pointing at the officer, and placing him in a split-second decision because the driver's actions of accelerating were the proximate cause of the officer's injuries. He still retains the right to self-defense, even if he placed himself in front of the car initially. So I'm assuming we're all going to have some different points about that. So
I brought up the fact, I think last Friday in the first debate with Andy Signor, that the car backed up. The officer was there in front of the car. At that point, he was kind of off to the side. Then the car turned towards the officer. The officer was actually standing, or agent, whatever you want to call it, was standing. The car turned into him.
I've
from the video.
From the New York Times analysis, I see her attempt to do a 3-point turn, and the officer is walking across in its direction. I mean, the officer is, and even if he's not like actively walking in front of it, he is persisting to be in front of it. Now, I'm not claiming that it resolves the case. The Supreme Court has said in the Felix decision that that's still an open question, right? That some circuits have applied the officer created hazard doctrine, some courts as well. I think personally they ought to, right? We can all think of a scenario which would be absurd if this weren't part of the objectively reasonable test. Like an officer jumps into oncoming traffic, creates the danger, and then shoots the person, right? Like that can't be, at some level of extreme, I think most people's intuitions would kick in and be like, that can't be objectively reasonable. So I think the doctrine should exist in some form. I'm not claiming that it will be dispositive, and I don't need it for my analysis, but in this case, no one has provided a like tactical or strategic reason why it would make sense for him, regardless of whether he walked in front, which I believe he did, but even put that aside, for him to persist to be in front of that vehicle. Why?
Well,
I'm sorry, I apologize.
no, go ahead.
Yeah,
I got to share this
I was
comment.
persisting based on what I saw. Is like he was walking around. He was walking around the car, right? Because he started from basically where he would only be hit, and then he walked around the entire.
Can you get close to the mic, Kurt?
I'll get closer.
Yeah, a little quiet.
No worries. I was saying he started from where he would ultimately get hit from that left front corner, and then he walked around the entire circumference of the car and wound up kind of back where he was when the car accelerated towards him. So I don't think he was. I think he was probably, although it's there's no time, but it seems like he was intending on continuing his path, to complete and keep walking forward. I don't think he was trying to stand anywhere.
Well, then he should have completed it.
I don't think
when the car leached forward and he obviously froze a little bit in place when that happened.
Well, let's do
if
this.
I'm remembering the. Oh, sorry, Nate. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say let's do this. I'm going to play. Pisco referenced the New York Times version, so I have that, and then there's another version that Tim Pool did that kind of contradicts. So I'll play both versions so we can kind of see, and then we can then point to whichever
Fair and
one.
balanced, Nate. I love it. Yes.
If that's okay with everybody, I assume
that is so chill with me.
All right. So I'll start with Pisco's New York Times analysis. If that's all right. Because
this is the latest one, right? The one that was just like released.
This is 8 days ago. It says
Oh.
Administration's ICE shooting in Minneapolis.
Let me send you the recent one. So why don't you do the Tim Pool one first, as I send you that.
So you'll send me the recent one,
Yep.
and I'll do Tim Pool first, so we can see this. So this is the answer to the question: was the officer in front of the car? Here we go at the stage, and this is Tim Pool.
Let's go back to the lie. Here's the officer. Here's the vehicle reversing. The officer is not in front of the vehicle. She reverses, and now he is in front of the vehicle. He initially is to the right of the vehicle. By all means, argue he should not have placed himself in this position. We're talking about seconds. Watch this. The vehicle stops here. The wheels are pointed left. As you can see, the officer is standing right in front of the vehicle. Now watch this. Right there. You see the front tire? Watch the front tire right here. The wheels are pointed left, and she accelerates. The wheel spins out on ice. Then, with the wheels pointed at the officer, having spun out already, meaning the officer can hear the engine rev with it pointed at him, he draws his weapon. And in a second, because this is slow mode, she then begins to turn right, hitting him, and he shoots.
Okay, so that's the Tim Pool version.
Mm-hmm.
And would you send the other one? Did you send it to me DM or
Twitter DM? Yep, that's right.
All right. I do not have. Oh, there it is. Got it now. I'm playing this.
Now it's a 7-minute one, so you have to find where.
It's behind a paywall.
Oh, okay. Well, I actually have. You know what I'll do? I'll just tweet out the full video, okay. and then you can just look at my tweet. Yes. Got it. So I'm now going to publicly, and then I'll delete this.
Hey, share this while you're at it, by the way. Let them know you're here. It's
New York Times. We're using this clip for the Laid Back Law channel.
Oh, you know what? There's another guy who does. Did you see that guy's breakdown of it that says he wasn't hit? I can play that because I have that ready.
Yeah, if you have that ready to go, that's great. And it's uploading it. I'll have the tweet up. It's posting, and I'll send you the tweet.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's try to put this one in here then. But he doesn't really speak to. He speaks to whether he was hit. He doesn't speak about whether he's in front. So
My friend Nate, I have the tweet. The tweet is up, and you can just go on Twitter.
I'm going to go check the tweet right now.
I DM'd you.
This is
to the
willful
show.
copyright infringement. Oh, you DM'd me?
Hey,
Yeah,
fair use, Pisco. Fair use. Fair use.
My bad.
Yeah.
I'll retweet this as well, Eric.
Okay, and I'm going to scrub it.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Your counselor would like a word, Pisco.
So yeah. So go forward until she's backing up, and then you'll hear him talk.
Can you give us a time index?
Oh yeah, right about there. Right there. Yeah.
Right here, right?
Yeah. Right.
Can you make it full screen, Nate? On bottom right corner. Yeah. So we can...
And here we go.
To break down what happens during these critical 6 seconds. Here, the agent's cell phone footage shows he's moving directly in front of the SUV as it's reversing and rotating towards him, initiating a 3-point turn.
Can you pause real quick? So that
law
is
enforcement officers are trained to avoid doing.
So that is undeniable, right? Because the camera itself.
Oh, let me finish. Let me finish his point.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, I think it's kind of irrefutable. I mean, the camera is moving. His body is moving alongside with. So it's not just the car moving and him like staying where he is. He is moving. And I don't know how anyone can deny that.
Back it up a couple
can we play it
minutes.
again?
All right, so I'm backing it up.
I just want to see if it matches what he's saying.
So
Yeah, exactly.
here we go. So he is moving, and the car is moving at the same time. If that's what it looks like. But you know she's moving because the wheels are moving.
Right. Yeah, no, they're both moving.
So they're moving at the same time, and
then he stops.
And then she stops the car here, and he's in front of the car, right? Because you could see the car stopped. He's got the camera, and he's still in front of the car.
Right. And my contention is we're talking right now about the doctrine of officer created hazard. And again, with all the caveats, and I agree with you guys that I would never let this be dispositive. It's just whether we should consider it. I think that there's no good like tactical reason for him persisting in front of the vehicle. He should be continuing to make his movement. There's no good reason for him to stop.
Well,
there could be tons of good reasons for that. I mean, like, do we know what the ground conditions were? Like, was he standing on ice? Was he continuing his movement? Like, I think I don't think that you could say there's no good reason. I could think of a ton of good reasons.
Sorry, there's no plausible reason that anyone has offered. And so, because you would have to, if you're going to make the claim that it's because of ice conditions, that's your claim to justify. But I don't see any good reason. I don't have any reason to think that that the reason he stops has to do with, him concerned about slipping. That would just be conjecture.
I would. So this video. So now, watching the slow motion doesn't really give you the time frame because it's like we can see it. He's in front. So what I've done in this clip, I've taken both, synced them, but I've also added a timer, so we can see how fast everything happens and what reaction time we're talking about. Because we've all agreed she's turning the car and he's walking in front, and they kind of did it together. So you could make the argument based on what we're saying. He walked in front of the car, but you can also make the same argument. She pointed the car at him, right? It's because they were moving at the same time. I don't think there's any denying that. So here we go, and there's going to be a timer pops up on this so we can see. It's going to run in real time. So here it is. Now, just to stop, you see the white lights there, so we know the car's in reverse. Play it. So 3 shots, and literally it's like 1.45 seconds. I'll play it again. Yep. So you're saying in 3 seconds, essentially, less than 3 seconds, less than 2 seconds. I'll play it again. Get out of the car. So now timer starts, and we'll see. So the shot. So we're talking about less than 2 seconds.
Under 1 second, he was hit by the vehicle.
Yeah. So she
I contend that he was ever hit by the vehicle. I don't think that's been established.
Yes.
Just heads up.
No, but we'll go to
that's a later argument. But good. Thank you for teasing that one, Pisco.
Yeah, sure.
But so let's say he's not hit by the vehicle, but in this case, we're talking about less than 2 seconds to move from in front of the vehicle.
Correct.
Right? That's what we're talking about. Because
yeah, no doubt. It's in a couple of seconds. It's not more than that.
Actually, 1 second.
So I'm just making it very clear. The car was in reverse. She puts it in drive, hits the gas, and a second later, the officer she's going toward the officer. So we're talking about a second.
Yes.
So does that change anyone's analysis having
No.
now the stopper here? But let me ask let me pull it back here. Let me ask Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning of this, like this clip like morally disquieted me. It bothered me when I watched it. That my opinion on that hasn't changed. If I had to guess what's the probability that you could get a conviction against this officer in court, I'd say like sub 5%. You know, like this happened very, very fast. He was rotating around the car as we talked about. The car suddenly backs up, accelerates. I do think the point Tim Pool made about the noise and if the engine's revving and what the officer knows and doesn't, or even could reasonably know or not know in that 2-second window. And then, I think there's probably in hindsight 2020 land, a lot of stuff we could say that would have been a better choice to have
Everybody
made.
move away from the camera right now. 1, 2, 3.
Wait, everyone do what? I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you. What'd you say?
Well, but Pisco, that's exactly the point.
No, we're over the internet. No, what are you trying to say?
No, he said,
move out of the way, and then it's like, all right, 1, 2, 3. Now we're like 20 seconds in, and you're still saying, "What did you say? What did you say?" You had less than a second.
No.
Well, and that's why the Supreme Court has made it real clear that hindsight 2020 is not the test, right? Because this stuff happened so fast, like Nate just demonstrated.
So what Nate is demonstrating on a stream where there's absolutely zero perception of a possibility of flight, where there's no encounter with a human being, where there's no any indicia that we're going to have to be called upon to make any kind of decision like that. To think that this little experiment that you have with a trained officer, as though this is a substitute for the standards that the Supreme Court has put upon us, I think that's laughable. Why don't we actually apply the standards from the Supreme Court and see what the decision is?
Well, to be fair, Pisco, we don't have any cars handy to stand in front of.
I know that
now, but thank you.
I think the fact that it's not
just to be clear, the whole point of the exercise was not for you to actually move, right? But just to understand, in 1 second, we're talking about a very, very short amount of time, and every single piece of case law. And Pisco, I know you know this, and I know Ryan knows this, and all the lawyers know this. And we're talking about in seconds. It's going to be extremely hard for any prosecutor to say that in 1 second he was able to react in the way most people are saying he should have stepped out. Some people are saying he should have shot the tires. And I think when you look at it in the time frame that it really happened.
But you're doing what Barnes tells us not to do. Barnes tells us not to just look at the moment, right, of the incident. Barnes tells us to look at the totality of circumstances, and that includes everything that came up before it. That includes him adjusting his phone, putting it in the different hand. That includes the nature of the confrontation. That includes the officer created hazard. That includes, or at least it might, with respect to what the Supreme Court ultimately rule on. That includes the fact that they're trying to initiate a stop in the first place, which puts them on. Remember, the gun is drawn before he fires it. And so to act as though, and before the car moves forward, to act as though we only look at a 1 second is to be in direct contradiction to what the Supreme Court said we're supposed to do, and Barnes v. Felix.
To respond to that particular point, I think a lot of people misread Barnes. So just so everybody understands what happened with Barnes.
And this is not Robert Barnes, the lawyer, folks. This is a decision called Barnes v. something or another,
in which I believe it's the Fifth Circuit. They essentially took Graham v. Connor, and said it only depends on the moment the officer uses force. Was he scared? And if he was scared, then we're going to do that. And it went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court essentially said no. Connor is the totality of the circumstances, and they've essentially narrowed Connor to this one moment in time. So what I'm saying is that I'm not saying just look at this moment. I'm saying look at it as a factor. Now, factors are weighed, and I believe the weight of a factor is you got in front of a car in 1 second. I believe that factor is going to weigh a little bit more heavily than whether he switched his hand for his phone, whether he did this. And I think if you look at the totality of the circumstances, I think this is one of many factors, and I think you rightfully so. For instance, the fact that there were 3 officers there versus one driver, those factors do matter. But I believe this is an important factor in terms of timing. Ryan,
it all factors in. And with Barnes, I think it's important to remember that what the Supreme Court was avoiding was this absurd circumstance where because of the nature of the facts in Barnes, the officer had jumped onto essentially the sill of a car. And but he didn't fire for like 1 or 2 seconds after that point. So if you had to do like just the microsecond before he fired, the analysis would start and end with him already attached to the car, which is obviously nonsense, right? That doesn't mean that, you know, we don't take into account all the things Pisco said, but it also means you have to take into account all the stuff that Tim Pool was pointing out. Like if you're approaching a car, we can talk about whether he should have been in front of the car or not, but he was. And when you're in front of the car and you hear the engine rev and suddenly it's moving towards you, you know, and what are you going to do in that circumstance, in that second? Yeah, we can talk about the whole circumstances, but that doesn't mean that that micro interaction isn't going to be the heart of the issue if this was ever presented to a jury.
We can go about this in various different ways, but what I propose is this is the argument that I've had most success with in convincing people who think differently. And so I'm wondering if this, if you would indulge me in providing it to you guys.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sure.
So the objective reasonability test, I'm not going to ask you questions to do my usual Socratic thing. I'm just going to lay it out. The objective reasonability test is not just a test regarding the nature of a threat an officer might face. The test is looking at the force, whether the force is objectively reasonable in light of qualifying circumstances or a threat. Okay. And in that context, it's not enough to say that the car imposed an imminent threat of serious bodily injury. I don't think it did, but let's just move past that. We might have a disagreement about that. Let's assume that it was a qualifying threat. Okay. Would an objectively reasonable officer in the position of this guy, this ICE agent, would they think that shooting the gun at the driver would have any tendency to prevent that threat? And the answer, I think, if you guys are believers in inertia, in physics, in the fact that the car is not like linked to the biology of the woman driving it, has to be no. There is no good reason.
I disagree with him.
Okay, if you were to kill this woman in the second you're talking about, how does that eliminate the threat of the car already in motion?
Okay, well, here we go. I think the video actually demonstrated it. The agent fired his weapon. The driver was disabled. The vehicle rolled slowly, bumped into another car, and stopped. The threat was over. Ugly as it sounds, the video itself did play out that there was a threat. The threat was stopped by his actions. And again, I'm not judging anything else, but the threat was stopped by his actions.
It wasn't
Nobody else was under any threat. The vehicle was completely stopped, completely down.
There's an equivocation there, though, right? And this is the equivocation.
Which one?
The equivocation is what we're talking about threat here. Which threat? Okay. And what people are arguing is the threat that justifies the use of force in the video is the threat to the officer standing in front of the car. They're not making
the officer who was touching the door, and potentially her wife too. By the way, her wife could have been harmed in this encounter. A lot of people aren't even talking about that, but she's on the other side of the car, pulled the handle, kind of sort of got away, but she could have been hit by the other wheel, the vehicle. No, I'm just saying there was more people technically possibly in threat in this particular encounrer.
Let's just take it step by step. Imagine that the guy in the front isn't.
And I have a question for you, Pisco.
Yes. Okay.
Go ahead.
But I want to take it apart because it really, this can't be correct, Eric, what you just said. And I'll tell you why.
It can't be.
Imagine that the cop who was in front of the car wasn't in front of the car and was to the side. Would it be justified to shoot the driver on the basis of the threat to the wife? Number one, yes or no?
No.
Would it be justified to shoot the driver with respect to the threat to the person whose hand is in the car?
Hold on. Just one quick thing. You just gave us a whole speech about totality of the circumstances. So, and your microcosm, this one.
And I said totality.
Just so we can have a fair reading. The wife, the other officer with his arm in the car, and the officer. So we have to think about them all, and then you would ask the question.
No, but
is it justified under the totality?
So are you guys arguing that the threat isn't just the threat to the officer in front of the car, but also to the officer in the driver's side part of it, and also the wife? Is that part of the threat?
What I'm saying is that you remember. I don't know if I'm going to play it back, but you remember we were saying micro. Oh, look at this in the micro. And then you correctly stated you have to look at the totality of the circumstances. This is this, and then now you're making the argument. Well, in this particular one, it's
I'm just asking your macro
perspective. Right, in each individual situation, you may be right, but you're arguing against your own point because you said the totality of circumstances. So I would say you would have to kind of evaluate all three and then come to determine.
Can I ask my question now? Because I think it might be helpful, just so I understand your point, Pisco. Are in your analysis, are you assuming that she wasn't purposefully trying to hit the officer? Oh, because the thing that I don't understand, like, and maybe it's just to help explain the question, because it's honestly, I'm just trying to.
I understand where it's coming from, but the answer is yes.
Like, let's say an officer was standing there, and his friends were trying to arrest somebody who had a knife, and the man with the knife starts running. Now he's running off angle to the officer, right? He's not running directly at the officer. He's running off angle. But he's running, he's charging with a knife. There's people around, right? And he gets shot. I don't think the fact that his current course of angle wouldn't have directly clipped the officer is the issue. The concern is the guy might correct course and stab me, right? Like, are you,
Ryan? Ryan. So
she wasn't trying to hit him.
So I'm assuming that an objectively reasonable officer in his position would not have the indicia such as existed in Plumhoff, such as existed in many of these other high-speed chases, that there is a madman who's intentionally or willing to abide by unjustifiable risk. So yes, that is an assumption of what I'm saying. If I thought that it was reasonable for him to apprehend an intentional driver who's trying to kill a person, maybe there's a different analysis, and maybe in that context, the shot would stop the threat. But I just don't think there's a good basis to believe that. But I want to make sure that we have. Ryan.
I think it's an interesting question.
I think it's a critical question. I think it's a very important question. But I want to remove things off of the table before we get into that. So I want to remove any case that people would make that part of the justification is a deadly threat or serious bodily injury to the wife or to the other cops. Does anyone claim that? It's only the officer.
It's possible.
I cut Ryan off. So Ryan, you wanted to respond.
This is why I wanted to interject the question there, because it depends. Like, if the officer believed that she was trying to hit him on purpose, then I think that it would be reasonable for him to then think that she might try to hit another officer on purpose or her own wife accidentally. And that's why I was asking the question of, like, what are we assuming about the officer's belief about her intention? And this goes back to the Tim Pool clip, because if you're standing in front of a car, like you're a law enforcement officer, you say, stop the car, get out of the car, and their response is to rev the engine and go out, and it comes forward, and maybe it hits
rev
you, maybe it
the engine.
That's the point you dispute.
It was revved.
But like, I don't know why in that moment it would be unreasonable to assume they're doing it on purpose.
Well, let me ask you the question. Is the fact that she's frantically moving the steering wheel to the right away from the officer, would an objectively reasonable officer in those circumstances consider that?
Let's see
the time. Can you see the tire from his angle?
I want to stop there. Let's see the time frame of that, because a lot of people have been making a scene, have been seeing like she was moving the wheel, but they've only been seeing it in microseconds. So
she's also doing the 3-point turn.
And just to remind Eric, I have a soft stop at 1:15. I can go a few minutes over, but I'm not going to go much longer.
I won't play it, but 2 seconds. So if you watch it in real time, you really can't. It's like so fast that you really can't really see it. But I can play it, but it's like it's the whole instance 7 seconds, and that part is just 2 seconds. So it almost seems unreasonable to think that brains process that fast.
So he can process where she is in relation to him such that he can shoot her, but not that she's turning to the right.
Yeah, no, hold on. That's an important point, Pisco. If you're in front of a car, I think you could process, holy shit, this car's about to hit me, is like very different than like, oh, to what extent has she turned the steering wheel? I think one is very easy to do in a quick moment. The other is actually quite hard.
Show his cell phone video, because that's the closest perspective we can get without body
where you can
camera
see her
of his eyes. And I want to see if we can see the tires angle from his cell phone video.
Well, the cell phone's not angled at the tires, but
his head isn't either. So no, you just said he can't tell that she's turning the tire, Pisco. You did say that.
Turning the
And I'm
wheel, the
saying
steering
I don't
wheel.
think he can. I don't think
The steering
looking at
wheel.
the steering wheel.
Yeah, the steering
How do you
wheel.
know where a steering wheel is? How
Because you
do
can see
know
it in
where
the
a steering-
video.
But how can you tell that the steering wheel is turned which way or what?
Based on the movement of her hands and the wheel spinning in
Right, but how
the
far was it
clockwork
over? Was it
direction.
all the way to the left, all the way to the right? I mean, it is a wheel. It is circular.
No, she is
kinda
manipulating
difficult.
it to the right, and after executing an obvious K-turn, an obvious
But, like,
turn.
Can we remember the example that Nate gave us? Like when Nate yelled, I couldn't even tell what Nate yelled or why he was yelling, but I did know he was yelling. You might know, holy shit, a car's coming at me without knowing like the angle of the wheel or the angle of the steering wheel. Like, I mean, like you recognize the danger, but you don't recognize the micro aspects.
Are you
of the
telling me that
situation.
that if someone's in front of you in your daily life, in your okay, press play. This is great.
All right. So now we're going to press play. We're at 38 seconds, 47 seconds. So I'll stop it right when the car hits him. So we'll
Yeah, I just want to be
hits
able
in
to
quotes.
look at her.
Hits in quotes.
all right. Well, we hear whatever. We hear
We
the phone
don't
drop.
hear it necessarily hit, and we haven't had any expert testimony
but
about
we
the
hear
audio.
something.
No,
Hold on. We're
that-
arguing another point at the moment.
Yeah.
We can visit that one later.
So she's her backing up. Clear K-turn. Clear
Hold on.
K-turn.
How many
Oh.
seconds was that?
That was less than 1 second.
It's a second.
half a
It's
second.
with
That was
it-
about 2 to
no,
3 seconds.
yes.
Play it again?
Yes, we can
Play
play
it
it again. Yes, 100%.
All right. So we started at 38. So here we go.
So she's backing up, right? Why
So
would
we started-
she
wait,
back
this
up?
is her backing up and moving forward. So we're talking about, let's count the seconds. Here we go.
You can just 36.
2, 3.
Yep. Yes.
So what you were saying again, Pisco? I'm sorry.
Yes. So what I'm saying is when you see her backing up to initiate a 3-point turn, most likely, and then gunning the wheel to the or the steering wheel to the right, that is the indicia of someone trying to escape. That is the indicia of someone not trying to intentionally hit you. That is what that means.
So you're reading her mind?
No, come on, Eric. That's not what I said.
I'm just saying.
You've seen this clip twice.
Yeah.
What color was her shirt?
Yeah, I'm not looking at the color of her shirt. I don't know.
Exactly, right?
I don't know.
You're not.
You can't look at the color of the shirt.
No,
you're not
but
looking at the color of the jacket.
there are
you
some.
really can't. Matter of fact, it's even hard to see her steering the wheel. Like I did. Like looking at this clip now,
That's what I was trying to say.
I didn't even see her steering the wheel because it happened so fast.
Yeah.
You're talking about 3 seconds.
So then-
So
Nate,
we're talking
Nate,
about
I've
1
got to
second.
agree with you, Nate. Like you played the clip, and I've seen this clip less than some of you maybe because I wasn't in the weeds on this earlier.
Did you
but
see her move the turn the wheel?
my first reaction was, "Holy shit, the car's coming!" And then on like the second view, because I was looking for it, because that's what we're talking about. Then I'm like, "Oh, what's she doing with the wheel?" But like
This
in a
cope.
one-off, I don't know that you would have seen that.
This is
How's this
cope.
cope?
It is cope because his first of all, his eyes are trained right on her. And what is he? A cop in that situation? Wait a
How
second.
do you know that?
Because you can
Yeah,
see,
yeah,
you can see the eye line. You can see the eye line from the other angles.
From the other one. Okay.
An
Yeah.
objectively
Okay,
reasonable, officer in whatever he's doing there, he has his gun out. Agreed. At this time, he has his gun out. Correct.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
An objectively reasonable officer in that position is not concentrating on her for the purpose of knowing what her shirt color is or remembering what she looks like from the facial perspective. What he's looking for are signs of a threat, signs for what she's doing in the car. That's what an objectively reasonable officer is
You're
doing.
right. Hold on, I agree.
And
Pisco,
part of that
and
is
he
seeing
did have
how
a
she's
sign of a threat. It was a vehicle accelerating rapidly into him.
No,
You're right. There was a sign of a threat.
Hang on a
there.
second. So, would you agree that an objectively reasonable officer who is in the mode of trying to assess a threat would be looking at what she's doing with her hands? Is she taking out a gun? Is she directing the car towards you? That's what an objectively reasonable officer is looking at. And so the fact that I can't identify the color of the shirt after I read it, that's not the critical information that an
Well, he
objectively reasonable
pointed that-
officer would be looking for.
Hold on. He pointed it out because you're talking about steering wheel function and everything else. He was saying, hey, these details are really difficult to see. And I pointed out because you had mentioned the angle of the tires that he would see. And I'm saying, no, he couldn't see it from that angle, what direction the tires were going. He could only go, I'm here, vehicle coming, oh shit, bang. There's not a lot of time. So the shirt color Yeah, you're right. That's not the biggest focus. You can barely see it any damn way. But I'm saying you really can't tell that easily what is going on with the wheel either. She's not two-handed doing the wheel even, so there's only one hand going back and forth. I'm a driver, and when I'm turning, the wheel turn, I'll let it slide in my hand. So I may not even be asserting pressure on the wheel to turn it. Here's a question. It's very difficult. So then now you're going to go, vehicle is coming at me. Vehicle's coming at me. Here's a threat.
So first of all, let's distinguish between the camera view and his view, right? He's holding the camera, and he's even taller. He's not holding it like this, right? At this point, he's changed hands of which camera is
approximate.
Okay, and so no one can deny that he had visibility of the woman. Okay, the proof of this is he shot at the woman. Okay, that's additional.
I just got to call out the assumption. He saw her doing the wheel, or something like we're making
an objectively reasonable.
No. I mean, Pisco, I honestly, man, I think we're getting close to like the objectively superhuman officer at this point, rather than the objectively reasonable officer.
Are you serious with this?
The objectively reasonable officer does not see everything perfectly, does not make every decision perfectly, is not aware. The question we're asking, Pisco, on some level, when we put the objectively reasonable test out there, is we're asking, as a matter of policy, can we hold officers to this standard such that we're going to criminally punish them in the event that they make a mistake? That's kind of what.
Don't zoom out. Don't zoom out to policy.
And here, I mean, I think, look, we watched this video, and like I said, I do not morally, I don't love this shoot, but like
we don't need the grandstanding. Let's focus on legal stuff.
Hold on, it's not grandstanding.
I think that we watched the video, and the immediate reaction that I think most of us, excepting yourself, seem to have had is, "Holy shit, a car's coming at me," which is the threat. Like I think that's what anybody would experience if a car gunned its engine and then drove at you. You say, "Holy shit, a car."
So let's just be clear about something. Do you think in that moment, an objectively reasonable officer has the capacity to assess whether or not a person is driving intentionally towards them or driving to the right, that it's even possible?
I'm going to say really quickly, I'm going to just slide something in here real quickly, because we need to have an objectively reasonable officer. There's happens to be one person on this chat who is a police officer. So I'll just put it straight to him. Nate, as an objectively reasonable police officer, from all of your experience, please answer for me that question that was just asked.
Well, all right. So Pisco, I think with Pisco, I'm just going to be honest. I think what you're doing is generally when we talk about objectively, we build a fictitious officer and put them in there and say, based on what would they do in that situation. I think with Pisco, what you've done is say you believe an objectively reasonable officer do, but you're saying this is the only thing an objectively reasonable officer.
No, I'm not saying that.
I'm saying, but that's the way I'm interpreting it. Okay. And every case that I've dealt with, when you do have things like this, there are multiple things that are just, so we're not asking what is the best possible option in this scenario.
I know that.
What we're asking is that there are a myriad of things that an objectively reasonable officer would do. Like, for instance, he could have jumped out of the way and laid on the floor. He could have done this, or he could have pulled out his weapon. So
I'm not doing
that realm of possibilities of things that a reasonable officer, not this officer, because one thing a lot of people do is you'll see it in the chat too. Oh, he was hit by a car 6 months ago. That's irrelevant for this analysis, because we're talking about an objectively reasonable officer, not that officer with his experience.
Okay. So
in that case, you may be right. Everything you're saying is correct, but that is not the only way you can respond.
I want to be very clear about what I'm doing here. I'm not saying that cops are constitutionally required to do the best thing and optimal thing all the time. Some people will try to do that. Okay. There are some lefties. I know, I feel like I have to do a lefty bashing just because, I don't know, if I don't do it, people will think it is true.
Hold on. I'm the CUNY law grad. I'm the lefty, and you'll see in all the videos I'm on.
No, I appreciate that.
Hold on. I want to hear this. Go ahead and bash the left.
Okay. So there are some lefties who kind of take this view that if you don't do literal optimal stuff, that therefore you have violated the Constitution. Okay, that's not the case, right? it could be the objectively reasonable thing to do, or among a menu of objectively reasonable actions that one can take to cause the death of innocent people. Okay, if you remember the Breonna Taylor case, what was the result in that case? Are you intending to put me the only person there? Oh, that's me.
No, I just wanted to get that for everybody to helpfully.
It was really funny. So,
right. So
it was objectively funny.
It was objectively funny. So
not superhumanly funny.
In the Breonna Taylor case, right? You can say all the things you want about how it was stupid to do the no-knock warrant. Did they get the right address? Whatever you want to say, okay? But at the point in which the cops reach the door and execute that warrant, and they're fired upon, we can say that, yeah, it was objectively reasonable for those officers to take the shots in response and to kill an innocent person in Breonna Taylor. And again, that's not making any kind of like moral assessment about the broader circumstances that caused Breonna Taylor's death. And so I'm not.
And in Breonna Taylor, the boyfriend had a reason to shoot at the cops too.
Right,
So
all kinds of. I would agree with that as well. And I do also agree that the cops like outside were probably guilty of a crime, even though they didn't actually kill her, right? Because the bullets didn't connect with her, those bullets. And so all of this is important, and it's a way of me signaling that I know, right? It could be the case that an objectively reasonable action taken by an officer causes untold suffering to innocent people. And some of these cases involve like collateral damage to like people who are walking along a way where they take out a car and the car like lands on them. So I'm not trying to apply either a superhuman standard or you have to do the best thing, otherwise it's not constitutional. What I'm doing is incredibly narrow. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I don't want to be really rude. Just Ryan has to step out, so I want to give him an opportunity to tell us, where we can find him and what he has coming up. So I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much for doing that, by the way. That's very sweet of you. And thanks for having me on. This is an awesome show, and I'm glad to be part of it. I hope I can come back. So yeah, I'm Ryan Mullally. I have, my name's on screen. You can find me on X and YouTube with the same handle. Small but growing community, law, philosophy, Supreme Court stuff, debates with Pisco, everything good. And yeah, just to give my final thoughts on this before I head out. Thank you guys. And I think the video kind of speaks for itself. I think that the first reaction is the reaction that people would have, which is holy shit, a car. And we can Monday night quarterback that as much as we want, but ultimately the standard isn't the superhuman officer or the perfect officer, it's the reasonable officer. And I think when you watch that, the reasonable reaction is I'm about to get hit by a fucking car, and that is a deadly threat. But anyway, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, and I hope to do this again sometime.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Great.
And y'all should follow his channel.
So you can definitely respond to that, because I know you want to respond.
I just want to say I appreciate Ryan. Even though we disagree a lot, I appreciate his presence on this, as well as you guys. And I think this is a really interesting conversation. And there is a lot of common ground here. I think we're all kind of agreeing with a lot of the structure of the legal test. And now the real difficulty is in applying it. So I'm thankful that we're here so far. And I want to just sort of state what my intention is. My intention is not to apply some insane standard. My intention is to be really narrowly focused in this moment on one question, which is, would an objectively reasonable officer who is pointing a gun at a human being, would they be looking at the direction of the human being?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Since I think we agree that an objectively reasonable officer who is pointing a gun, now we can think of cases in which you can't see your target, right? We can think of cases in which, because they're behind some cover or because it's too dark to see and the threat's there. I'm not going to say that at all times you can't aim your gun without being able to perceive the target of it. But in this case, in the daylight, we would say in the main run of cases that an objectively reasonable officer pointing their gun is going to be looking at the direction of their gun and looking at the target.
I want to caveat that possibly. And the reason why I'm caveating that is because the car is coming to it. Because again, we're talking about 2 seconds, and we are talking about a moving vehicle. And for whatever reason, the camera goes up and all kind of. So you don't believe he was hit. I believe he was hit, but something did happen in that moment, which does kind of change the dynamic. So I would say
I just want to correct one real quick. I don't
you have to take into account the time frame too.
I agree. The time frame is highly relevant here. I want to say to everybody, I'm not discounting the time frame. And I recognize that the dicta from Graham v. Connor that you put up about 2020 hindsight, I'm not here to run away from the test or run away from the standard or pretend that time isn't relevant as a consideration. Highly relevant as a consideration. No doubt about that. I want to make my beliefs clear about the hit, the alleged hit. I'm not saying that I know it didn't happen. What I'm saying is I'm not convinced it did. And I think that the video that we've seen is equivocal, by which I mean it's open, it's unclear, right? It's ambiguous.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
I would
saying.
agree with that.
Okay.
But my response to that is, at first, all the left, because I actually I actually put it in like the video, and I was going to, and I could show, but I don't want to take up too much time because we're going to move to the next point. But all the left wing sources were saying, and matter of fact, Breaking Points loves you to death. I don't know, Crystal. She loves you to death, because our next point is actually her quoting you. But it's hilarious. But who are we talking about? We were just talking about.
So we're talking about sort of the, oh my God, I just totally lost it too. We just had a collective brain fart. The pressure was on.
I just had brain surgery, so I don't know what.
I don't have an excuse for it.
I'm the non-lawyer.
Well, let's do this. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next point.
Wait. I just want to know about the hit. We were talking about the hit. The hit for me isn't relevant.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Oh, I know exactly what I was going to say. I'm sorry. Well, go
actually, yeah. I agree.
I'm sorry.
Both ways.
So what I'm going to say is
exactly go ahead.
Go for it.
So exactly what I was going to say is I took up all the left wing sources, ABC, NBC. They all said the car doesn't look like the guy was hit. All the right wing sources were saying he's hit. It's clear. But then now, at this moment in time, I have clips from ABC, CBS, CNN, MSN. Now they all collectively have said the cop was hit. And then I even have a clip of the mayor who says this was an unjustified shooting. He initially said the cop wasn't hit, and he has now come out and said definitively the cop was hit by the car, but he's downplayed the hit. He said it was just a slight bump. So now I would say this: all sources, left, right, and even the officials in Minnesota who are saying that this is all wrong, have all said the officer was hit. So with that, I would say it's now on the person saying the officer wasn't hit to show me proof that he wasn't hit, if that makes sense.
So I don't think that shifts the burden. I think the burden is on the evidence, the weight of the evidence. And I think that I'm the one who takes an agnostic position, which is I'm not sure if he was hit or not. I'm more convinced by the New York Times analysis, which continues to say it's not clear, and where they attribute, and I think with a lot of logic behind it, the impact that you hear from the cell phone video of him positioning his body to aim the shot on the vehicle. And so I think that you can put out whatever statements you want from stupid Democrats, from news organizations. We need to observe
news organizations. Yeah,
that's all I'm saying. But we need to observe the evidence, and the evidence we have is this video from a distance, which I agree. When you press play on it fastly, it looks like he gets bumped or hit. But if you zoom in at the time, it is not clear. And that's still the evidence that we're going on. It was unclear when we saw the video then, and it's unclear now. I don't say he wasn't hit. I say I'm not sure. And none of the statements changes that.
Hold on, question. I just want to make sure, because there's a lot of things that we're asking. Is it fair to say whether he is hit or not if the threat in his brain or whatever was there? It's kind of irrelevant whether he's actually hit or not. If he felt like he was going to be hit or he wasn't hit, right? That's sort of the argument that would go in front of a jury.
This is really smart from Eric, right? So yes, everyone who is like super focusing on the hit is missing the big point. For me, whether he was hit or not is minimally probative. It's some relevance, okay? I think that you're going to lean on this heavily if you're the defense, if you were ever charged, which I don't say is a foregone conclusion at all. Again, or that a jury would convict him. I'm not making those claims. I'm just telling you my thoughts on what we're seeing. And Eric is absolutely correct. The hit is going to be minimally relevant. Why? Because if it's the case that he is in serious risk of serious bodily injury or death, then you don't have to wait till you get hit before you use force in that context, right? So supposing the force is reasonably necessary, right? So on that assumption alone. So yeah, in some ways, being hit first is almost kind of like worse, at least in one respect. If he were hit and then he shot, well, you're not allowed to, if you were like bumped, let's say it's a minor hit or something, or it's a grace, you're not allowed to like shoot to punish action that was taken. Sure. You're allowed to shoot to prevent. So you could even make an argument that if he were hit and then he shot, maybe even a worse scenario for him. So the hit focus, I think, is totally political. And for me, it's not super, super dispositive or relevant.
From what I saw in the video angles I've played, and now just the understanding of what it looks like, and CNN's own analysis, they showed that that when you listen to the front from all the angles, it seems like he was shooting while being hit. So essentially, he's
concurrent to
shooting
me.
while the assault is concurring. And if that's the case, then it's going to be really hard to make the argument that it wasn't
that it was punishment.
But
No.
I would say this: there's a difference between shooting after the fact and shooting during.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
that it's a matter of seconds. So I'm fine assuming that it's concurrent.
2 seconds. Let's just 2 seconds. But I want to move to the next point because this point is all for you. Crystal said this is your point. And she said this is a good.
No. The point, but it's not been elaborated yet. Which is
I'm talking about the next point. Oh. This one we're moving on from. Go ahead. You get the last word.
So my last point is the following: an objectively reasonable officer in his position, knowing the distance between his body and the car, aiming the gun at her, would know that she's turning to the right. And knowing that she's turning to the right, which means that an objectively reasonable officer wouldn't apprehend that she's trying to hit him. Why is that relevant? That's relevant because if it's the case that an objectively reasonable person wouldn't think that she's trying to hit him, then the only justification to use the force is not on the basis that she's going to continue to manipulate the car so as to hit other people or to be reckless about it. The only justification is going to be to prevent the hit that's coming towards him. And there is just no logical tendency between shooting the woman at that distance and stopping a car. An object in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. And of course, if you shoot her at that distance, it has no tendency to prevent the threat. That's one of the reasons why the DHS policies, which were violated, are the way they are, because it's actually less safe in general to have a vehicle being operated by someone who is either incapacitated or bleeding out. And what we saw wasn't a slow roll to another vehicle. It was an acceleration towards another vehicle. And so because the force, this is the last line, I'll let you finish. Because the use of force has no logical tendency to prevent it, and an objective reasonable officer would know that, therefore, how can it be justified? How can it be justified to use force which has no logical tendency to prevent the qualifying threat?
Okay, now to wrap this point up, I'm just going to say, to wrap it up, we're in disagreement, but we're still friendly, which is cool. So we're going to move to the next point. No, this is helpful.
I love it.
And those who are, watching this in replay or in the chat or whatever, please comment below your opinion. I think both of us have made a case at this point. I'm not going to regenerate the whole argument or anything. Pisco wrapped up his point, so we're going to move on to the next point, and we're just going to agree to disagree at this.
No, I love that, and hey, all love. If you disagree, that's great. I'm just happy we're having the conversation, and I appreciate the opportunity to make the case.
Oh yeah, and I think you made a very good. I think you made a good case, even though I feel there were points that I could rebut. But you had the last word. We're moving on. Shot by shot assessment. Critics argue that the first shot, even if it was justified, the final 2 shots were murder because the car was either passing him, and some say had already passed. And the counterpoint to that is that the whole event is 7 seconds, and the 3 shots occurred in 0.7 seconds. All cases in which something like this happens, the courts generally, if not unanimously, treat this as a single use of force because of human physiology and perception reaction time that prevents officers from stopping shooting and reassessing between rapid fire split-second shots. The case that is the Plumhoff case, where the Supreme Court says you treat multiple shots fired in rapid succession, continuous bursts, as one single use of force for Fourth Amendment analysis, not as separate, independently judged uses of force. So in this particular case, 0.7 seconds, 3 shots. My understanding is that the analysis would be that this would be one single use of force, and the second and third shots, based on previous precedent, would not matter. And the Plumhoff case, there were 15 shots in 10 seconds, and in this case, it's 3 shots in 0.7 seconds.
Question before we go further, because I just want to set a baseline.
Cool.
And it's no judgment.
Yeah.
I know you fired pistols before, Nate. Pisco, have you fired a pistol?
Not a pistol, shotguns and rifles.
Okay, well, it is very, very relevant to understand the pistol itself and the ability to fire. So I'm saying this is one continuous action. Those shots were fired honestly faster than I could fire. The guy is a more skilled shooter, probably because he's experienced or whatever, but those shots were so rapid, it was not a case of shoot, pause, shoot, pause, shoot, pause. It was just an instinctive boom, 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 stop the threat type of a shot. So that is my basic opinion, and I'm pretty much in alignment with the second part of what Nate said. I think he fired until he couldn't. Threat is stopped. That is the point. So I'll hand it over. I know Pisco probably disagrees with me on that.
Go ahead, Pisco.
I actually agree on some things and disagree. Like, I agree with a core point there that I think that we can talk about for sure. But I disagree with the legal aspect of it, and we'll talk about that. But I do want to say hi to Nick Ricada. How you doing, Nick?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I like the specs. I think they're cool. Okay, so here's
Like
what
Mark.
Well, then let Pisco finish, and then we'll go to you.
Yeah, no. I'm interested to hear Ricada's take on this. I think we need to start with the basics. Does Plumhoff stand for the proposition that you don't analyze those other shots, or does Plumhoff stand for the proposition that in the context of Plumhoff's facts, that it was reasonable to do those shots? And I say it's the latter. What Plumhoff is holding isn't that you don't analyze those other shots. It's that those other shots are reasonable given the circumstances. That's what I think is, because there are some people who say, oh, you don't even look at those other shots. There's like a one window or two window period of discretion, and you just don't even look at them, right? That's not what Plumhoff stands for, right? Plumhoff stands for the opposite. What Plumhoff stands for is the amount of bullets there, and them using 15 bullets or whatever in 10 seconds was reasonable under the circumstances, under all of the factual circumstances. So I think we agree on that so far, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Plumhoff, just so everybody understands, Plumhoff is another car case. 15 shots. First, it was 3 shots. Then the guy drove away, crashed the car into another car. Then it was 15 continuous shots from everybody in 10 seconds. And the court said because he had already hit someone, it was essentially it was reasonable for them to think that he was posed a danger to, and the woman, because it was a woman in a car to an innocent bystander who was also killed by those 15 shots.
Right.
So, but my understanding is Plumhoff stands for the proposition. If you have multiple shots, because of the physiology of it, if you have multiple shots fired in rapid succession, it would be treated as one single use of force. Obviously, there would be some exceptions, but I don't.
I don't agree with that, right?
So here's why you're wrong. I'm gonna cut you off, Pisco.
Yeah.
Before you say the wrong thing, I'll help you out, and I'll frame this differently, because what you need to do under Plumhoff is not analyze each shot independently. You have to prove that some shot is removed from the force continuum.
Yeah,
that's
right.
what you have to do. Everybody's looking at this backwards. They're looking at this from the start going, oh, I go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, and each individual shot is measured. No, the officer gets the presumption of innocence, and the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he acted unreasonably. Not that he does not have to prove he acted reasonably. He has the presumption of reasonableness in the commission of his duties in making any of the shots. So they have to come in and prove it unreasonable. So if you want to sever shot 2 and 3, you can sever shot 3, 2 and 3, or 2 somehow. You have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it's removed from the continuum first.
So I don't disagree on burdens. So in the case of these use of force situations and self-defense, there's like an initial burden that a lot of defendants will have to show, assuming this case were ever to be tried. There's an initial burden, and then ultimately the state, usually, right? Although there's some differences, I think. I'm going to assume in Minnesota it is actually the case that you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the use of force was unreasonable. So the burden is the government on that. Nick and I are totally agreed on that. The question, though, is I don't agree with you importing language that I don't believe exists in Plumhoff regarding like the use of force continuum, and it needs to be separated from that use of.
It doesn't exist in Plumhoff because it's synthesis of what Plumhoff means, and you have to apply it to the situation you're in.
Yeah. So
I can read the exact language, but we are trying to synthesize. So I would just give some charity,
No.
But if you believe it's a bad synthesis, then
I do think that, right? Because in Plumhoff, the key thing is every shot does need to be justified. Do I recommend
yes, but
let me finish, please.
Let him finish. His point.
I'm not saying that
we
you
established those rules earlier.
Yeah.
When somebody's speaking, they want to finish.
I'm sorry.
No worries. It's good. No. Hey. I usually interrupt a lot, and I've even interrupted Nate a little bit here, so I'm sorry for my rule violations as well. I'm not saying you hermetically seal the shot as though you ignore A, the time period between the first and second and third shots, or B, that you like try to limit your analysis just to that little bullet in that little window from like a God's point of view, like a top-down real-time strategy. I'm not saying that. Every shot is judged according to the same standard, totality of circumstances and objective reasonable test. And that's what Plumhoff stands for, is that you have to analyze it. Now, I agree that sometimes based on when like the reaction speed of a normal officer and the threat and whether it persists
here, because there's a specific point that you're going past that needs to be addressed. The totality of the circumstances, for some reason, everybody thinks the totality of the circumstances doesn't encapsulate the totality of the circumstances, which is the two preceding shots.
I agree. No, we need to include those. Did you hear me say we shouldn't?
No,
I explicitly said.
You know, hold on. Let me reset everything. Hold on. Before we finish, Nick, let me reset everything. I want to. The reason why is because it gets confusing and it gets hard for us all to follow. Let's let Pisco just finish out what he's saying, because it's helped, because a lot of times he'll answer a lot of these questions. I've noticed that, like, he'll make his point, then he'll answer the question I was about to ask, and then I'll be like, oh shit. So let him finish, and then we'll go right to Nick.
Sure. I think that's fair, and I'll let Nick talk, and I won't interrupt him. Mm-hmm. All the communists who say you analyze the individual bullet and ignore the previous bullets, that's stupid. So I don't agree with the communists who say that, okay? So you don't just analyze the bullet, ignore the other bullets, ignore the time between them. I'm not saying that. I just want to be clear. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is merely that every shot needs to be justified. Now, you might make the argument that it's a reasonable case or an easy case here, because obviously they're all justified, because the threat continues and a reasonable officer wouldn't physically be able to distinguish a changed circumstance in the time the shots were fired, such that the threat would be like different in their head. But that's just, I'm just merely stating, and then we can get into that analysis, that it's not this one like second fun zone. And I'm going to, when we actually apply Plumhoff, get into the facts of Plumhoff and how they compare to the current situation. So I do want to give room for Nick to talk. That's all I'm saying. I think it's a baseline that everyone should agree with, which is essentially that Plumhoff stands for all shots need to be justified. But obviously I don't buy this communist interpretation where we ignore the previous shots.
You'd specifically
so I think we're close in agreement to a degree. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the reason I was trying to jump in is because you had specifically said that the shots have to be justified under the totality of the circumstances.
They do.
Good. But again, presumptively, all of the shots are justified.
In virtue of what?
What?
In virtue of what are they all presumptive?
The legal standard of the prosecution has to prove that they could not
innocent until proven guilty.
No, but that's true of all this stuff. That's true of everything. Yeah,
everybody says it's true, but they also forget it, like you're doing now, because presumptively every shot under the totality of the circumstances is justified until you overcome the presumption beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to presume that they're justified, and you have to presume that they're part of the same force continuum until the state proves otherwise, until they take it out of the force continuum. It's their burden to do it. They have to do it. He doesn't have to prove that it's the same thing. It is the same thing until the state proves it isn't.
Yeah, well, so but the problem is we're not a criminal trial right now, and we're not beholden to now. This might be true if you're like predicting a future trial.
The state has to get to this before they can charge him.
I totally agree. I just want to make sure that like we're not applying in our conversation the burdens that are applied in the context of a criminal trial. That's all I'm saying. And I think that what you're saying, Nick, is highly relevant in terms of like predicting whether they're going to charge him, predicting what the jury's going to say. But
can I ask one question? Because I kind of feel like we're arguing interpretation of the law. I just want to know where everybody stands on this particular circumstance. Now, I laid out my case. I said that I felt that the 3 rounds, 4 rounds, whatever it was a single course of action in a continuum, to borrow Nick's thing. Pisco, do you disagree? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we actually disagreed on the basic point.
Can I ask it this way? Mm-hmm. Do we think that a court would take these shots and separate it from 1 to 2 based on the case law from Plumhoff? I believe the court will see this as a single use of force transaction, not 3 separate use of force transactions, based on the timing and the understanding. But if you disagree with that, I would
Please
just like
lay
to
that out.
understand why you disagree with that.
Yeah, I think it's a misnomer to suggest that what I'm talking about implies that the court will run an analysis of bullet 1, bullet 2, bullet 3 in the way that you're sort of presenting it. So far, and though I will get to the disagreement point, all I'm saying is, regardless of how you look at it, every shot need be justified. And so I do think that if the prosecution pushes a distinction between different shots, the court will be forced to address it, and will be forced to address. Now, maybe they'll just say it's all one, because a reasonable officer wouldn't be able to distinguish any kind of difference in the threat. And again, this entire thing is assuming the first shot is justified, which we just talked about. So we're only talking about the later shots right now. So this is all contingent on the assumption that the first shot is justified, and the other shots can sort of like map on to the first shot's justification. I'm not saying that a court will on its own go through that analysis, but if one of the parties, namely the government here, pushes that there is a difference there, the court will have to deal with that if they're like, or the jury in some case, whoever the determiner is of fact, they'll have to deal with that. And maybe the answer is just what the answer was in Plumhoff. But I think there are reasons to distinguish Plumhoff, which would make it so at least my determination would be different. I'm not saying that I know what a court would do.
What about this line in Plumhoff? Human physiology and perception reaction time prevents an officer from stopping and reassessing between rapid fire trigger pulls in a split second.
Yeah, so there are instances in which that is true. There are cases in which it's impossible.
Not instances, it's always true.
Well, no, because we literally have tests of reaction times, which says that
and there is a bottom limit. There is a limitation. It follows the language. See, you look at everything backwards, and it makes everything impossible for you.
I'm not sure that I'm looking at it backwards. If the question is whether or not the dicta from Plumhoff regarding, there is a period in which you can't assess a change in threat, that is true. But there's a threshold, right? There's a threshold. There's a period at which a reasonable officer could distinguish a change in circumstances for the threat. And so all of us agree that with that baseline, the only question is, in this case, do we think an objectively reasonable officer would be able to? That's the question.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, I'm going to rephrase the question a different way. If
Really
you don't
important. That's not the question. No. Because you said, would an officer be reasonably able to? No, that is not the question. The question is it unreasonable for him not to?
He's right. He's right.
Can I just ask in terms of this case?
I would agree with that. No, I would agree with that correction. I don't have a problem with that correction. Yeah, no, to be more precise, would it be objectively unreasonable for the officer to not perceive that difference in threat? I mean, I agree. I think that the test itself is phrased in terms of objective reasonableness. Is the force objectively reasonable? But part of that might look into whether or not it's reasonable for the officer to make that distinction or not to, or for them not to have not made that distinction or something like that. But for me, it doesn't change much in this context.
Okay, well, in this context, I have one overriding question. Pisco, if the first shot is justified, now we know you don't think the first shot is justified, but if, let's say, the first shot is found to be justified, are number 2 and 3 as well?
No. And I don't think that Plumhoff stands for that proposition. And I can explain why. So the nature of the threat in Plumhoff is fundamentally different than what happened in this case. And I think everyone on this panel should agree with that.
Yes, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that.
And part of what is informing the decision in Plumhoff is very similar to this other case. I think it's called Scott v. Harris. Is that the right one? This
I think it's Harris.
Yeah.
Right.
And where you have this kind of like insane chase, this outrageous chase that happens. The person sometimes is fleeing from an inherently dangerous crime, where flight by itself is a threat to public safety, right? So, and to say nothing of the circumstances of the driving that where one can intuit this kind of malicious disregard for safety of officers, safety of others. So the totality of circumstances, it's impossible, in my opinion, to disentangle the leading up circumstances to Plumhoff, to Harris, to these different like high-speed chase situations where you need to stop this motherfucker from driving in any respect because they're driving alone, their flight alone. They have shown themselves to be such a danger to the community and to officer safety that the nature of the threat is like, you need to kill them.
you're looking backwards again because you're saying
hindsight.
You need no. I mean, you're looking at the problem backwards, not hindsight. I mean, yes, we'll get to that. You're saying you need to use deadly force to stop this motherfucker right now. That's the burden you just put on the cop, is that they're or the analysis. You said
I'm asking the question: would an objectively reasonable officer in the position
answer though?
No, reasonable necessity, and that's the standard. I mean, that's the standard we're talking about here. Is the Fourth Amendment provides for protections against unreasonable seizures, and these are seizures, right? And so the question is this objectively reasonable use of force? That's the question. Agree, Ricada?
Is this an objectively reasonable
use of force? Correct.
Yes. And if it's three occurrences versus one,
an objective reasonable use of force, because there could be other reasonable things.
Yeah, I'm not saying yes. I'm not saying perfect.
No, you said you needed to get to the point where you need to stop this motherfucker with deadly force. The officer doesn't need to stop the motherfucker with deadly force, and that's not the threshold.
So it is, and I'll ask you, and this question I think will elaborate it. Do you think that deadly force is justified even when it's not reasonably necessary?
What?
Do you think deadly force is justified even when not reasonable?
Well, I think we're distracting from the question that I asked, which I just said, if the first shot is justified, are the following two? I feel like all this is a distraction, right? But you haven't explained why that. You've gone on to another case here.
I'm responding to
driving
Ricada.
around and all of that.
To be fair, he like Ricada did jump. He's responsible. Well, I'll say this. Let me say it from my perspective.
Yeah.
I believe this will be treated as one use of force because in the case that we're citing, it was 15 shots in 10 seconds. In this one, it's 3 shots in 0.7 seconds. I'll even give it a second. And I think under just human physiology, and when you read through the case, they really harp on that human beings' reaction times. And you've got 0.5 seconds to assess the threat, 0.2 seconds to respond to the threat, and then another 0.5 seconds to. So you could have multiple and also number 2, training. In training, you are learned to continue to shoot until the threat is over. And in this particular case, I think you can make the argument, the shortened time frame, the 2 seconds, then that's essentially why they would treat this as one.
I want to talk about it.
Yeah, what would say you?
Well, first I'll say, I think that we all recognize in this panel that the use of deadly force needs to be reasonably necessary. And that doesn't mean that I think that reasonable necessity means perfect analysis, that no mistakes will happen, that there couldn't be other reasonable courses of conduct. I'm not saying any of that stuff. So I just want to be clear and heard on that point. Here, the first thing I want to establish is it physiologically possible for the officer to perceive a change in threat? And the answer to that is yes. In the short time period that we have there, we can at least agree. We don't have to agree that it's objectively, it would be unreasonable not to make the distinction. But the first thing we should agree upon is it is physiologically possible for a human being to make those kinds of distinctions, especially given the fact that he's changing how he's aiming the gun as the circumstances change in response to phenomena that's happening in front of him. So I think we should at least agree with that.
This is the hard part, Pisco, and I don't want to pick on you, but that's why I asked from the jump, have you ever fired a pistol?
I've fired guns, not pistols.
Okay, but it is relevant. And I think Nick, you've had a pistol. The speed. Fair enough. Yeah, not anymore. But anyway, the speed which he fired is so. I mean, I'm just trying to tell you. I have fired before. This is not. There's 0.7 second. It's
but
less
Eric,
than
let's be precise.
Second. No. To go between the shots. So my argument is 1 shot or 3, that these are the same as 1 shot, in my opinion, because there isn't any time in between. And I was a soldier. I did, burst fire. There is a factor in there. And I think it's you're trying to parse between, like, he's supposed to know between these 2 shots. Oh, it stopped now. The vehicle's still moving. We saw the vehicle continue to move even after that point. So that's why what I'm trying to do frustrated.
Is one moderation piece. We're going to go to Nick first because Nick has been trying to jump in. That's true. And then we're going to let Pisco have the last word on this issue too, and then we're going to move on to the trans case. So are we okay with that?
That's perfect.
All right. So Ricada, go ahead.
Okay. Real quick, what is your decision-making split?
Go ahead, Pisco.
I don't know what you mean by that. You have to clarify your meaning.
Okay, so you're saying that he can make a decision in some threshold time, right? Like that.
I'm saying initially, I just wanted to build a base that we agree it's physiologically possible.
Yeah. Right. It's okay. So it is physiologically possible to make a decision, and we know that there is some minimum time to make that decision, right? We know that, and that's what we're talking about, correct?
Correct. We're talking about first, is it even physiologically possible? Because I would agree with you. If it's not physiologically possible, then all this goes out the window. So that's why I'm trying to do that first.
So let me answer that question definitively, because the court did. And the definitive answer is its reaction time is 0.5 seconds. These were 3 shots in 0.7 seconds. So 3 shots. So to reassess, it would at least take 0.2 seconds for him to say, okay, this one is good, this one's good, this one's. So you're talking about generally human reaction time is 0.5 seconds. So it would almost be physically impossible for him to do the first 2 shots fit within that physically impossible.
So
the third shot may not.
So I'm just going to say, I think the denominator is bigger in terms of the times of the entirety of the shots, and so I'd be interested in that denominator. And I have seen studies.
I can play it though,
where it's sure. But I just want to say, I think like
you've been watching it in slow mo, bro.
There are studies that have been happening with like people who are trained with guns, that the reaction time is even less than half a second, just to be clear with you. Okay. But so that's all relevant. But I just like there are people who are able to do it even faster.
Yeah. What is yours? That's all I ask. What is yours?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what my reaction time is with a gun threat assessment. And Rakeda, it's not relevant what mine is, right? I could be stuck in a fucking chair. It's not relevant, dude.
He's right.
Well, we can argue.
What's that?
Nate, what's yours?
No, I think Pisco's right. It's an objectively reasonable officer, not Pisco.
I know. But listen, Nate, what's your split?
Oh, I would not be able to. Absolutely not. I have many guns here. I've shot many times. There is no possible way.
This is all performative, Nick. This doesn't help you. I could have a slow reaction time. We all could. We're lawyers. Or at least
for you, though.
I've been trained.
Why do you impose upon the officer the requirement to know his threshold reaction time? You don't, none of us do. None of us know our threshold reaction time.
No.
5 seconds.
Knowledge of one's reaction time isn't what we're analyzing here first. The first question is it even possible physiologically? And none of you have answered that yet.
Yes,
it's possible.
I didn't
hear, Nick. I didn't hear.
It may not have been. May not. But you know what, though? Before we get dragged down into that again,
okay.
I'm gonna let Pisco get the last word so we can go to our last story. Go ahead, Pisco.
And we have a ton of super chats too, Nate. So get those in between if you can.
This will be my.
I never got a point.
So finish. I'm sorry. You're right. Finish your point, Nick. Then we're throwing it over to Pisco, and Pisco gets the last word. Go ahead, Nick.
Unfortunately, I missed like the beginning where everybody got to set up their things.
Yeah. So go set it up. You got the time.
Yep. I want to say all of these shots are justified under multiple reasons. All of them are justified for danger to the officer, danger to the woman, and danger to the other 2 officers, all of whom are in close contact with the car and easily could be dragged. This is presumed, and you have to understand what presumption actually means. All of this is presumed because of the presumption of innocence and because of the inherent danger of a vehicle near anyone. You have to overcome that presumption to say that the action is unreasonable, because it is presumptively reasonable to determine that a car moving in proximity to someone is dangerous. And you know this inherently because when you go to a road walking, you stop before you enter the road because you know that a car moving is dangerous. Everybody knows this. It is presumed to be dangerous to have a car moving near anyone. You overcome that presumption by saying, well, this person is this far away, or this far away, or this far away. That is how you have to do this analysis. It starts with the presumption that it's dangerous because there's a car in proximity that's moving. We know that it's dangerous because it did hit him. But even if you think it didn't, and you said this isn't relevant, which I agree with, it's not relevant if it hit him or not. But so even if it didn't hit him, we know it's still a danger because it could hit him. And he reasonably presumes that a car is dangerous. Without getting further than that in that analysis, we can similarly say all 3 shots are justified under a separate analysis, and that's danger to the community. The moment she puts the car in drive, even if he's not in danger, Her fleeing a scene in a residential area in a car is presumptively dangerous to the public, which justifies the use of deadly force so long as the officer is able to fire at the operator and not at the vehicle generally. Everyone conflates the fleeing aspect because DHS suggests that you can't fire solely to stop a fleeing vehicle. Well, yeah, you can't fire at the vehicle. They're talking about being at distance and firing generally towards the vehicle, hoping to strike the driver. When he's pointing the gun into the window to shoot the woman, that is actually more reasonable because it is more likely to stop the threat. Earlier today, or earlier in the conversation, you said he needed to stop the car. That's not the goal. That is not the standard, and that is not the purpose of the shot. The shot is to stop the threat. The threat is the operator of the weapon. The operator is the driver. The weapon is the car. You're not shooting to stop the weapon. We don't shoot guns out of people's hands. We shoot the person who uses the gun. This car did stop because of the shots. Objectively, that occurred. Now, people will say it stopped because of the car that it rammed into, but it rammed into that car because of the shots. And if you're going to say she might have ran into the car anyway, you're proving automatically that she's a danger to the public. And of course, a car moving in a residential neighborhood away from cops who will then pursue her is a danger to everyone and the public, which justifies the shots until she is no longer a danger or until it is unreasonable to fire on the car to fire on the operator to make the operator stop. So if he doesn't have a clear shot, but again, you operate backwards. All of this is presumed to be reasonable until you show a fact pattern that says it isn't reasonable. Like if he couldn't see the driver and he started shooting, that's unreasonable.
Now, hold on, just one second, Nick. You've given Pisco a lot to respond to, and I don't want
him to respond to. I'm telling him he's incorrect from the outset.
No, I'm saying, but I'm assuming he wants to respond to a lot of those points. So I want to understand he grasped it. So I want to give him the just fair time because we're running out of time. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll try to be summary. I think that.
No, I want to give you as much time as he got, but I want to make sure.
I'll just say that I think you mischaracterized part of the conversation we had before, where I very clearly said it's to prevent the threat. I didn't say only the car, and of course we analyzed the possibility that the driver was a danger to the public. That's why I was asking questions of, do you think this is justified under different rationales? Do you think it's justified for the other cops, for his wife? And so it was clear that I was thinking of the possibility of this being justified under different kinds of threats. And it's clear also that when I was talking about it, the use of force and its tendency to prevent the threat, I wasn't just encapsulating the threat in terms of just the vehicle. The question is, would it prevent the qualifying threat? And in the case of someone who's manipulating the car so as to hit someone or with like reckless disregard of that fact, maybe you can make that argument. And certainly you could make it of the people who, of Plumhoff.
I'm going to jump in here. You're missing something about that. That's really, really important. And this is what I got. My comment was deleted earlier in the chat. This is what I had said. The fact that shooting into the vehicle might increase the threat because the car a driver might step on the gas and run into something, as we saw here, right? Like that's possible. It's also possible the driver could step on the brake. The cop can't possibly know what she will do. The increase of danger, the possible increase of danger, doesn't mean that the underlying danger disappears or becomes unreasonable. Do you understand like how critical that is to the analysis? If she is a danger while fleeing, you said that shooting into vehicles, cops know that, those vehicles that often veer off or do whatever. The fact that cops know that the danger is sometimes possibly increased does not change the fact that the danger existed at the time of shot that justified the deadly force. So what you would have to do is say something the cop knows when taking the shot makes it unreasonable. And again, it's because you approach this from the wrong side. You keep coming at this as if Ross has to justify his actions. But Ross doesn't. He's a law enforcement officer in the lawful commission of his duties who makes a shot in response to a deadly threat. And those are the presumptions that you go into court with, that the state has to overcome.
Now I gotta cut you off, Nick. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
The
no,
only reason why this is going on a little bit too long. Pisco,
I'll
I
finish up.
promise to give you the last
Yeah.
word. You have it uninterrupted. Go.
I'll finish up and say, listen, the burdens of the criminal court don't apply to us having this conversation. I agree that the burden is going to be the state's, but we're having a conversation about what's objectively reasonable given the facts and circumstances. And though I agree it's the state's burden, I don't think that we need to apply them in the nature of our conversation. I mean, I obviously agree that you're not looking to post hoc things that occurred after the fact to determine in the moment, right? I'm not looking and saying he should have been able to know what would have happened with the car accelerating in the future. I'm not relying on that. And it's a misnomer that I am. And I'm not saying that, it's never reasonable to shoot a vehicle that's coming towards you. I never made that per se rule. I never implied that at all. What I'm trying to say though, is in the position of that officer where he is in that moment, right? With respect to his own safety, if you want to have a broader conversation about the rationale of public safety, I think that this is not on all fours with previous shootings that have been justified on virtue of that justification. But in this shooting, there's no way the car is going to be prevented in any respect, or that an objectively reasonable officer would know or would think that shooting the person in that context would have any tendency to lower the imminent threat that is upon him. And so you would have to rely on some other set of facts. That is that an objectively reasonable officer would think that she is, intentionally doing it, or that an objectively reasonable officer would think that, there's some community of like, I don't know, a procession of a fucking, what do they call a parade behind or something. So you'd have to point to other facts that would justify that rationale. But on the basis of self-defense of the officer, shooting this woman is not going to stop the car from hitting him if it did hit him. And again, I don't think that the hit is super relevant. On the specific point that the sub point that we're here about is if the first is justified and the others are justified, we should have another conversation about that later on. I know we're out of time on it, but needless to say, I think not only is it physiologically possible for a human being to respond in the time window for the other two shots, I think all the indicia, the fact that he's moving his body and aiming the gun, shows that not only did it change, he in fact was able to immediately respond to this different change in circumstances. And if you look at the scientific evidence, cops are able to do it. And I don't think it's unreasonable. And it's different than Plumhoff, where the threat almost coexists with the fact that they're driving at all. And it really, really was a insane fact pattern that preceded it. But I'll leave it there.
All right. So same statement again. Everybody, you've heard both sides of the situation, especially on replay crew, everything else. Please comment below what you think and how you feel about it. And we're moving to the next point. Nate, you're driving.
Well, we're gonna do two things. Number one, I want to ask our guests. We have we are 2 hours in. We can do 30 more minutes on the trans case. We can stop here and hold that for next week. If you guys want to stay another half an hour, we can do that.
I'm good. I'm good.
I'm tight on time.
All right, you guys are good. Now, number two, what we're going to do, if the people in the chat, you've heard both arguments. You've heard Nick and you've heard Pisco. Now, I know we got a very conservative crew, so I'm assuming, but if you side with Nick, put a 1 in the chat. If you side with Pisco, put a 2 in the chat.
My chat too.
That's legal arguments too. Now, I'm putting a 2 because I'm just starting it off. I'm just putting a 2, and then I'm also going to put a 1 because I want to make sure.
Be fair, of course, yes.
The damn numbers. So now, Eric is going to read some of the super chats while you guys, and so we can start doing it, and then we'll move to the next story. So Eric, if you please, can you start doing the super chats while people are voting, and we'll make it happen.
All right, we got a ton of super chats, by the way, so there's gonna really
but let's just try to knock down 10, and then we'll move to the next case.
Hardway Harrison, Trump's tactic of creating chaos is working magnificently. Sure, has overshadowed the fact that we are led by a bunch of PDFs. Release the Epstein files. Okay, next. A new member. Hey, thank you very much. We do appreciate that very much. Ernest Williams. What do we have? Can't be here for this. Pisco troll dude is not here in good faith. Now, come on. In fairness, and I've got to say, Pisco, you've been great. No, I really appreciate it. Last time it was like stepping over, but I do think that this is a much more comfortable debate to where we're all getting points in, and I feel heated, but I do appreciate it, by the way. And Nick, thanks for coming in here, dude, at the last minute.
Sorry, I was watching you guys in the shower. That's what took me so long.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to go any further
way about that.
Okay, and then Hardway Harrison again. I think this person might have something they were concerned about, and the Epstein files. Okay, I understand that. We're not talking about that today, but thank you. Swamp Dog Clyde.
Wait. That I might have a view on the Epstein files?
No, we are not.
Oh, no, I'm just saying I support the release of the Epstein files, and I think it's ridiculous that they're trying to hide them. Yeah.
Well, I support them, but I'm not. Again, that's sidetrack. And
oh, sorry, I was just responding. My bad.
I appreciate super chats, and I appreciate the money, but if you're going to come in and you're trying to inject something, then fine. I'll probably read your chat, or I won't read the chat, but that doesn't mean we're going to talk about it. It's not a law. Sean is here. He missed the link for earlier. He would have been on the stream.
Oh.
To me, at least, he was filming the car to document the impeding, and then once the arrest happens, it looks like he headed over to film the arrest. His phone was functioning as a body camera. I agree. In my opinion, I've talked to Nate about it before. Because they're communicating through text or whatever, there are a lot of people who've been blocking over the days. I think he was capturing the license plate so he could send it, text it to whomever, and say, here's the car, here's this, here's that. Because the body camera footage, and you guys know more than I do, is not immediately available until like the end of the day. They've got to turn it in, upload it to the servers, things like that. So by using the phone, it's an investigatory tool for doing his job, in my opinion.
Also, just a specific fact for Minnesota, the ICE agents deployed to Minnesota and already here are not under the requirement to use body cameras.
Right, they're federal.
Right, some deployments of ICE do have body worn cameras. Minneapolis has not had them, so so using the phone as a body worn camera, that's all they've got.
All the more reason. Okay. Thank you.
And I think we all agree that we'd prefer them to wear it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
But they don't have them.
Yeah.
Right.
Like this is a big. So it's not like I don't want to mislead people into thinking that like the ICE agents have them available and are not wearing them. They don't have enough, and probably because there's a surge deployment of ICE agents here in the state. They've mentioned like 2,000 officers, which is quite a few. They just don't all have cameras, and they're not under the requirement to wear them.
Have you been to any of the protests, Nick?
No, I'm not. I don't live close to that, and I also don't go anywhere I might get stabbed.
And he might have other things to worry about. Let's see, Sandy Hall. It was a one-way street, no reason for a 3-point turn. Okay.
Right. Sorry, I clicked one by accident.
Okay, drive. Does the lesbian wife have civil liability exposure?
Possibly.
That's something to determine later.
Yeah,
we're working a criminal part. Hold on, I'm just trying to get through.
And I just want to say also, real quick on Nick's point, raise a good point on the burdens. It might even be more complicated in the civil context if anyone were to like sue him, because there you have to deal with qualified immunity. And then it's like you have to prove that they were away from the standard, not just applying the standard. So that adds another layer of complication in the civil damages context.
Oh, fair enough. If I say cops can, I flee over a cop too. Joke. Okay.
Oh, and on that point, sorry, I'm just getting triggered by this. You don't, if you're a lib or a communist, don't say, well, she looked nice and therefore it decides the case. I agree demeanor is relevant. Obviously, demeanor will always be relevant to a threat analysis. But don't say, well, because she seemed nice, therefore no threat. That's a bad analysis.
Okay. Burley Knoll. If this was an armed citizen in front of a stopped car and the same thing happened, wouldn't this be a clear case of self-defense?
I think they would they'd be very close.
That mentions a lot more going, because it's not about self-defense is different, because this is about a reasonable officer trained.
The constitutional standard doesn't apply.
Yeah, it's a higher standard for officers than it is just for
right. I was going to say it probably even more in the favor of the person making the shots.
Yeah, into self-defense. Yeah, because you would be like, well, you weren't trained, and so
right. How would they know that they were?
That's why I'm like,
with a self-defense analysis, fail to recognize that it's not even about this officer. It's about an objectively reasonable officer facing the same set of
although in self-defense it's an objectively reasonable person. Now you can query what the distinction is between those two. I think that they are related, right? But there's different kinds of evidence that you would provide in terms of training, in terms of expert opinion, and query whether or not that makes it an easier case for the officer or harder. I think we can look at it in different ways and see, is it actually helpful? This is a police encounter. And also, I would like people to think in the mode of self-defense for private citizens. I think most people in this context would be like, not justified for self-defense, regular self-defense, but they are technically sort of different standards.
All right.
I'm a civilian. I disagree.
We've read
But anyway.
10 super chats. We have 20.
Okay, good. So you guys keep driving. I've got to do show prep while we're.
You do show prep. I'll just do. So we got 19 super chats left, but I want to move to the trans case. We got about 20 minutes left. So I'm just going to run through the facts real quick. The cases that are happening at the Supreme Court, there are two cases a lot of people don't understand. First, West Virginia versus PBJ. Not peanut butter and jelly, but they use the initials for the kid. First, it's what I call the puberty blocker case. Young woman starts taking puberty blockers at the age of 12. Puberty blockers stops her from having she's born a male. Puberty blockers, so she doesn't have the male, she doesn't have the testosterone to say, because usually when you take puberty blockers, then you don't have the things like the muscle mass, bone structure that are used to distinguish between why men do better in sports. So since she essentially has the same body as a woman because she was taking estrogen, her body is more similar to a woman than a man. The law says that boys play. Well, actually, let me be very specific. The law says there's essentially one protected class, the girls' class. So girls can play with the boys, but boys cannot play with the girls, and it's done strictly on biology. Her argument is that the law is based on the rationale that females have a biological disadvantage against males in this context. But since she was on puberty blockers and she doesn't have those advantages that her counterparts does, the law is discriminatory against her as applied in her situation. So it's an as applied challenge, as applied to me, this rationale. Now, the counter argument is that this is protecting all women, and the state argues that they cannot do hormone checks for every individual student, and they need a category, and they just have clear categories: biological male, biological females, and it's a slippery slope if you let this person eventually compete with females, and that it's a back door into allowing puberty blockers. That's case one. Case two is Lindsay Helcock. She's from Boise State University. She did go through male puberty, but takes hormone, and she's been taking it for about a year. Now, she says that there is no evidence that says that her performance is closer to her male physiology than female physiology. She brings some studies and so forth and so forth. And she says the ban as applied to her, because she's been on these hormones, is unfair. And she says that if the state just actually looked at her testosterone levels and not her birth certificates, they would see that she doesn't have an unrealistic advantage in that case. So just so we know, one is a child who's taking puberty blockers and doesn't have those biological advantages of men, saying, hey, you shouldn't ban me and allow me to play at the women's team. And then the second one is someone who is taking hormones after they've gone through puberty and saying, hey, as applied to me, these puberty blockers, not the puberty blockers, these hormones essentially have made me into a woman. Now, the Supreme Court, obviously, in oral argument, seemed to suggest very harshly that they are on the side of, especially in the second case with the person in college, they're essentially going to deny her. They essentially more or less said that. But the other one, the PB&J case with the kid who actually took puberty blockers and went through, that case seems to be a little more fuzzy. So I'll start with Nick first. Nick, what do you think about these two cases and the outcome? And what do you think the possible outcome is going to be?
I agree with you on the second, or what you seem to indicate the Supreme Court is leaning towards on the second, where, that's saying that I've taken hormones to bring down the presumed advantages of testosterone and growing up biologically male in this particular area. I think they're going to say that there's no way to evenly apply that to fairly measure the hormonal impact for each person to bring it back down. I mean, we're operating on one presumption that that testosterone and growing up gives us physical advantage, right? So we have to, at some point, like create like a presumption on the other side. And they tried to do that with the Olympics. I think it was 2 years, and they've rolled that back. From what I understand, they're no longer allowing that. The 2 years of hormones. So I think that they're going to go along with the trending sort of theme is with the Olympics there. The other one I agree is a little more interesting, but I think it runs into a similar problem because similar to the trap question, sorry for the pun, trap question I asked Pisco earlier, what's your split? It's like, okay, well, when did you enter puberty? Like, when did it really happen? When did the physiological process of puberty begin in you, and how fast did it go, and when did it end? No one knows this, and there's not a way to measure it objectively. We can say that puberty is some objective point, but puberty is different in every single person. I would think, just real quick, I'll finish in 2 seconds.
No, I just want to, for that point, just in this particular case, I want to be very clear. It was shown that her metabolic rate, bone structure, muscle tendencies, and all that were actually affected. So technically, she did not go through male puberty, and she was taking estrogen to go through female puberty. So just the medical records from the case says,
right,
essentially this male went through female puberty, and everybody kind of agrees with that. I just want to make that very clear.
My mild pushback that I would have on that is, since they allegedly didn't go through male puberty, we don't know the difference in the advantages, and we don't know if she had if she had an anomalous female puberty, as we've seen with numerous women who are physically have different physical characteristics than the average, right? Like WNBA players, all much taller, obviously, right? So we don't know how that puberty affected this person, and because we can't know what the other outcome would be, right? Like they're saying they medically showed that basically she had a soft puberty, I guess, but we don't know if she would have otherwise had that and what the outcome would be. So I think they have to come down on the side of either requiring some sort of base hormone standard and hormone testing, which would unduly burden the state, to have all kids hormone tested for appropriate puberty outcomes or whatever, or they just have to go ahead and stick with biological sex at birth, which is the most easily discernible and objective standard that's out there. Like, we know what everyone is when they're born.
Now, how would you respond to the facts of the case in terms of this is an equal protection issue, and the rationale that they use for the exact law that we're citing is the biological differences, and they've been able to show that this person does not have those differences
as applied.
Right. So does that now change the situation for you, Nick? Because as applied, the rationale for the law doesn't work in this particular case as applied.
Yeah, is that the only rationale? Because I get asked that question. The premise is being argued that it's only physical differences as the reason. Is there any other factors that
the law is based on the law? The law specifically even wrote the law that male puberty makes the difference, and they were able to show how high school boys actually, if you run the 100-yard dash, the high school boys routinely break the women's world record that hasn't been broken in 30 years. So they're saying, so puberty is the marker, and they're saying that as applied, puberty is not the marker here. So
and it probably couldn't be like the state's interest in making it so that people don't become transgender. That's probably going to run into some of these rational basis with teeth cases where mere hatred of a group is whatever. So they need to have some sort of like legitimate state interest. That's why they, I think, probably went that way.
I mean, I think I think in response to your question, I do think it's an equal protection issue, though. And I think that the school policy needs to, and again, the objective way to do it is to just say, sorry, sex at birth is what they say now. Instead of saying biological gender, they say sex at birth. So sex at birth is the objective way to determine this. And the state either has to allow boys to play on girls' teams and girls to play on boys' teams, or they have to allow only boy teams and only girl teams, or a co-ed thing, right? Like they cannot do just girls can play on boys' teams, in my opinion, because
girls
that's
play on
interesting.
boys' teams.
But just to clear everything up, because I had to go do research is crazy. Okay, so there's a when you hear the arguments, it's crazy. There's a subsection of a subsection, which I'll explain. So first they separate men versus women, or boys versus girls. So now anybody, let's say, who is a trans man, a woman who can play on the men's team. There's no bar to entry because the men's side is actually called the open category. There is actually no men's team.
I think that's true also of like the NBA, by the way. I don't know if there's like a specific rule in the NBA that bans women.
Yeah. But actually in most, like you'll see this in NCAA, you'll see women kickers on like the football on the football team and things like that. So there's no bar to entry. The only protected group are the women's team. So what they're saying is the reason why it's discriminatory is because it's the trans woman is the only person in this group being discriminated against because they can't play on the team that they choose.
Yeah, so Ricada's must be right. Ricada must be right. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The response that the AG for West Virginia said is, but they're not being discriminated against because they can play. They can play in the open category. They just want to play in a protected category.
Yeah.
So if that gives you some more context to it.
Well, I think that you can try to slice it that way, but I think Ricada is ultimately correct that there's an equal protection issue somewhere here, and it needs to be resolved.
The subset of the subset. That's what they were arguing.
And it could be done in with respect to sex and with respect to discrimination between trans people or just discrimination against trans people in general. So, listen, in terms of my strong feelings on it, I think that there are legitimate state interests to protect women's sports. I think that's at least my view. But it's tough because I want to be
hearing that, bro.
What's that?
I almost fell out my seat hearing you say that.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know why. I'm a reasonable guy.
Because I had a like, but it shows you my biases. Because I thought you were going to argue for the other side. But it's interesting to hear like the arguments you're making
from a policy perspective.
I'm sorry.
Wait for the but. Wait for the but.
There is a but. There is a but. There is a but. I don't think. I do think there's an equal protection issue, and how it's defined. How sex is defined, how gender is defined matters to me, and how the test is applied matters to me. I don't think that it would fit, for example, intermediate scrutiny under VMI or whatever. Or assuming, by the way, that because how the court conceives of the equal protection issue will affect whether or not transgender people are protected by the equal protection clause as trans people or as some sort of subset of a subset, as you said, or like some sort of subgroup. How they define that really, really matters to me, and how I would define it. It wouldn't be categorical. Those wouldn't be reasonable. So I can imagine some sports in which that isn't a consideration. Now, a lot of sports, I think it will be, but even then, I think that there ought to be situations in which as applied challenges can be raised. I don't think, and I probably agree with Ricada, that having a rule, like a constitutionally mandated rule to like check hormones, that seems preposterous to me. A constitutional rule to like, it seems way too much to ask that the Constitution requires that. So yeah, I'm unsure. I don't have really strong feelings here. I want to listen to the oral arguments because I don't have a strong view, but how the question is framed really matters to me. And I'm going to tell you my prior is that depending on the context, I'm going to be way more amenable to one of these, whatever the statutory claim is or constitutional claim, than in like, for example, if it were to be like women's basketball or something like that, and it's someone post-puberty, there I'm going to be like, I think that there is a legitimate state interest in curating these groups of athletics, and it wouldn't not though for races, right? I wouldn't say this for that they have a legitimate state interest in having like black only sports leagues and things like that.
Scrutiny analysis.
Right, and that's a different analysis. That's both a higher analysis and I think one that's not based in some rooted biology, which I agree is there. So yeah, people might be disappointed by that take in terms of trans people. I am a big supporter of trans rights, and I think that there should be leagues open for them, co-ed leagues, that kind of stuff. And I think in certain places there should be no restrictions, and sometimes it will be illegal to have any restrictions. I just think it's a little bit more nuanced than some of the major partisans on each side are calling for. And how the Supreme Court makes this ruling really matters to me. So the words and the test and the rationale matters to me a lot.
Now, what about there's a Title IX. They've brought it both under equal protection and Title IX. So we can speak about the Title IX. Forget against the puberty blockers. It is you can't ban a girl from sports just because she's trans if she fits the physical profile of the actual law. So that's the thing in Virginia.
That could be really relevant for because if we all remember this opinion, oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of it. I think it starts with a B. This is the Gorsuch opinion on oh my God, on one.
Yeah, with sex equals. Yeah, I remember Casey talking about.
So go ahead. I'm just gonna finish up. I'll be one sentence. I think that could be relevant in terms of the actual like originalist analysis or legal analysis that we would consider like the denominator or the scope of the evidence that we consider differently for the statute versus the Constitution, which of course 14th Amendment was passed in 1868. So maybe it's tougher to argue that trans people are a protected class in 1868. Although let's be honest, in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, I think this is the 1970s, maybe the same thing applies. So yeah, I think that's relevant for judicial reasoning, but maybe not having a different result.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was just, I was curious about one thing you said. You said that you do believe that the state has an interest in protecting women's sports.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of curious what you think this, like, because I don't know what you think the state's interest in is specifically in protecting women's sports, because that does seem to that automatically seems to violate equal protection. Right?
Yeah.
Like, because if you're protecting women's sports, then similarly you have to protect men's sports. And you also mentioned, and I don't mean to compound the question, but it's kind of two things, and then I want to let you answer. The other thing you mentioned that caught my attention was the having specific like leagues for transgender people, and that sounds kind of like separate but equal, right? Like and especially in the context of schools, it starts to sound like Brown v. Board, and I think people get wrapped up in like the search for justice in all of these things, and they're trying to fix the wrong problem, and they overlook the fact that the most basic justice is to be as inclusive as possible in the main category entirely. And so I actually have a kind of a problem with women's sports in a way because of that.
Yeah,
like, from the perspective of the Constitution. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that there's maybe I could be swayed on it. I'm surprised. It's kind of weird because we're taking weirdly like opposite expected roles here. And for me, it's kind of similar to my diversity rationale and why I believed in not Grape. Oh my, I'm forgetting all my cases. They just overturned the affirmative action cases. Starts with a G. That's what I know. So I think that there's an interest to keep women engaged in physical activity and sports, and part of doing that is allowing them to have their own league, which is competitive in a way maybe it wouldn't be if we allowed biological males to sort of predominate without some sort of cutoff there. So yeah, maybe that's too weak of a state interest. I haven't thought about it a lot, to be honest, but that's my inclination. Again, I can be persuaded out of it.
Weight classes, Pisco?
Yeah, kind of
similar to weight classes in other events.
Kind of like that. No, but the difference is, in what Rekida's going to own me on, is like weight is not a recognized suspect classification, and
right?
yeah, so and so it wouldn't raise the same kind of scrutiny. That's my intuition, but as you talk about it more, you're maybe convincing me more of the ACLU. But I have that intuition. I wonder whether the Supreme Court. I want to read the briefs, but that's my inclination on the state interest there, and it does feel like separate but equal. But it would just be here.
I want to attack that point the second.
Yeah.
It seems like you guys agree, but I want to attack that point because discrimination doesn't mean, and not all discrimination is unlawful, and that's why we have these particular tests, right? for instance, they cited Craig v. Bourne a lot in the case. Where, for those of you who don't know, that's the case where men, you had to be 21 to drink or something like that, and women had to be 18.
It was easier for women.
And they showed that they said the rationale for that, there was an important government interest, because if you're talking about race, it has to be strict scrutiny, compelling government interest versus important government interest. And we do this all the time. For instance, with the selective service, men have to register, women do not. And we have a lot of these kind of discriminatory things that we allow based on gender. And the Supreme Court, I think, has to answer the question, is the state's important government interest in protecting women's sports? Because they brought up things like safety, having women play with men and that type of thing. And they're saying essentially that even if you do an equal protection analysis, the important government interest is the fact that they passed Title IX, forcing them to essentially create this category.
Yeah.
So overturning their statutes essentially would be backdoor overturning Title IX, because Title IX establishes the discriminatory effect that we're arguing about now. Except now we're talking about what you think you are versus what you actually are. If any of that made sense.
That made perfect sense. I do want to note that the Ninth Circuit, in one of these opinions, as I'm looking at it right now, they did determine that furthering women's equality and promoting fairness in female athletic teams is an important state interest. What they're arguing is about the tailoring, whether the per se ban is tailored sufficiently to the state interest there. And so I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that I think that there's an important state interest. I think it has to do with like promoting fairness, equality for female athletics, and making sure that our women are healthy and all that stuff. I just wanted to note that I'm not sold that the kind of restriction that these states are putting in place is like a necessary fit for the state interest, and that I think that there ought to be exceptions. And I don't think that the creation of exceptions necessarily is like an intolerable situation. Probably my position would be, if like in a perfect world, to do all sports in like one kind of like athletic aptitude and biological, like sex neutral, all neutral. But until we have like easier ways to test that, bone structure, et cetera, because it seems kind of unfair even for men, right? LeBron James can be on the same court as, I don't know, like any other scrub. Or I'm going to say, is it Jeremy Lin? This is probably racist, whatever. The fact that you have such massive skill disparities, even among the sexes, I, in my ideal world, would create a system that accounts for all those disparities, perhaps. But it just currently seems untenable given technologies and people's interests. And there does seem to be a public desire to have competitive female leagues. And so as long as that exists, I'm not against considering that an important state interest.
One of the problems, and I hate to jump in from the side, but I do think it's kind of relevant, is that the sports that in general that are competitive that we do right now were created by men for men historically. And there are other sports, for example, like long range swimming and long range running, that, believe it or not, you do have women who are winning as the overall winner, like with running 100-mile run, 200-mile runs. This is 100% true.
Swimming too.
Long distance swimming, especially, you have a woman who like swam the English Channel multiple times. Someone else who did the Amazon. The person who the Appalachian Trail. Have you heard of that? The world record just got smashed by a woman. Over everybody else in the world. So part of the issue too is that these sports are designed for one thing. Other sports, you'll find that, especially long-term endurance sports, women start to outperform or perform at parity. And I think that would be an interesting study, is to find out, okay, well, what if there's new sports that are created where you could, have
where the disparity doesn't matter as much, or when even women are that's why I think it needs to be more elastic. It can't just be that a state has an interest, all else equal, in every situation where there isn't this kind of biological advantage. That's my opinion. Or that
hold on, I got to answer this.
What?
For people who say that those aren't really sports,
yeah, come on.
You're an idiot. Sorry, you're an idiot. Go run. Go outside and run a marathon. Get back to me and tell me it's not a sport.
Yeah, and putting aside whether it's a sport or not. I do want to say, I apparently dishonored Jeremy Lin. Jeremy Lin was a pro. I was just, looking for my head for a basketball player who's not as athletic as LeBron James.
English.
But the last thing I'll say on it is I really do think that if they hold that, like, there's no protection for these people, we're going to run into a lot of these different situations where discrimination against transgender people is being funneled through these other ostensible rationales. And now it'll just be targeted at trans people directly, and it might lead to more of these oppressive laws that, as a matter of policy, I don't agree with. And so I'm really looking to see the Supreme Court try to have at least some sort of tailored opinion. That said, I don't have much confidence. I think that these laws are going to be upheld, and I think in general, it's unlikely for the court that they're going to consider, discrimination against trans people to be a suspect classification under the 14th Amendment. But maybe they'll only reach the statutory issue.
Nick, you have the last word.
Oh, no, I think I've said everything I wanted to say on those cases. I'm not too familiar with them, so I was really firing from the hip. Unlike Officer Ross. No, I'm just kidding. I have to get out of here.
All right, it's cool. Listen, we're about to just hit super chats and get up out of here and try to answer some questions. So if you guys got to go, thank you guys for spending 2.5 hours. Well, you just came in like 20 minutes ago, but thank you for spending 2.5 hours with us, Pisco. Thank you, Nick. This was a great discussion, and I think people actually learned something coming from this discussion. Because I love the back and forth. And the other case, no matter how you feel about it, you got to understand there are arguments on both sides, and I think those arguments can be compelling if someone is allowed to make them. So hopefully, at least you guys got to hear.
And thank you to the Majority Report who just rated. This is Laid Back Law. They do these shows every Friday, but thank you for the raid and appreciate Laid Back Law, Nate the lawyer, Eric, and Rakeda for having me.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys
very much.
Love y'all.
Have a good one.
See you, Nick.
Okay.
All right. So Pisco is trying to figure out how to leave the chat.
Apparently.
It's a button.
Okay, cool. Hey, folks. Hey, Majority Report. Thank you so much for the raid. Really appreciate y'all. Really appreciate Majority Report, Emma Vigeland, Sam Cedar. These are great people to watch. I love whenever some big news comes off, I have my list of people. I go Kyle Kalinske. I go see what Dave Packman's saying. I go see what Majority Report is saying. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for the raid. You just got the tail end of a legal discussion that we were having with some conservative lawyers. I am a left-wing, more liberal lawyer regarding the shooting, and then this Supreme Court case regarding trans people and the Equal Protection Clause in Title IX. But to just give you a little bit of a background, I'm assuming a lot of people from the Majority Report are familiar with the Renee Good shooting. And I'm going to take this opportunity right now to give you what I think is the best argument that this is murder and that it wasn't justified. I don't think that there was a qualifying threat to the ICE agent in that context. But when you're debating with conservatives, they can't wrap their heads around that a lot of the time. Okay. And they don't want to sort of concede that a glancing blow from a car, even if it existed, which I contest, I don't think that that's been established at all, may not represent a risk of serious bodily injury or death. So what I would focus on for people who are arguing this with their friends and family is to focus not just on the Supreme Court test with respect to the threat, but about the use of force, right? Because an objectively reasonable use of force needs to be tailored to the threat, okay? It needs to have some tendency in the mind of an objectively reasonable officer under the legal standards to lower that threat. And so a really intuitive way, I think, to ask this question and to get agreement on this fact is to pose to your interlocutor the following. Do you think an objectively reasonable officer in the ICE agent's position would think that shooting the driver would have any tendency to lower the qualifying threat, assuming that it qualified as a threat under the legal standards? And I think the answer is no, because of physics. I think the answer is no, because of inertia, right? It's not like shooting that woman in that context would have any tendency to stop the car in its path as it's already moving. and potentially glancing off the officer, though I want to stress that's not been established. And so focusing on that and trying to tailor the analysis as to the reasonableness of the force in relation to an alleged qualifying threat, I think has been very effective at least some people have changed their mind as I've talked to them. And so I appreciate that framing going forward, in addition to all the other stuff, right? So for those of you who don't know, right, the test is analyzed according to various different case laws set by the Supreme Court on the Fourth Amendment. The use of force by the government against individuals is considered a seizure, at least most of the forces that we're talking about. And they need to be analyzed under the Fourth Amendment precedent. A lot of states have incorporated those standards into their different laws and policies. So we have a base of analysis to work with. The cases are Tennessee v. Gardner. The cases are Graham v. Connor. This case Plumhoff that people are pushing at. And it is a kind of gestalt. It is a kind of morass, this objective reasonableness. But if you focus the inquiry on, well, let's think from the perspective of an objectively reasonable officer. If an objectively reasonable officer looks at their policies, which we think they do, if we think an objectively reasonable officer is likely trained as to the typical threat regarding shooting a moving vehicle, and to only do it in certain cases, if we think that we should read into the fact that the other cops surrounding this vehicle didn't draw their guns, do we think in that context that an objectively reasonable officer would fire to prevent a threat of bodily harm from the vehicle that's already in motion? And I think the answer is no. Add to that the question yet unresolved by the Supreme Court regarding officer created jeopardy or hazard. It is potentially relevant under the Supreme Court's analysis. They haven't decided it yet, but some circuit courts have, that whether an officer puts themselves in an unreasonable officer created hazard is relevant to the analysis. If you watch the New York Times frame by frame video analysis, you can see him walk in front of the car as it's backing up, clearly making a 3-point turn, and then staying there. Ask yourself, would an objectively reasonable officer under the circumstances do that? Would they persist in being there? I think the answer is no. And so to the extent that officer created hazard doctrine is relevant and ultimately relevant to the Supreme Court case law, I think that counts once again against the ICE agent in this context. And then finally, don't let people just focus in on this second analysis to try to scare you. You'll see people do that even in the conversation we just had. Like, oh, a second, what's a second? What's a second? What's a second? The human reaction time is faster than a second, okay? There are averages you can look at. They range, 0.2 seconds to 0.6 seconds, but it's less than that. And in the specific case we're talking about, right, this officer was able to use his reaction time faster than a second to get out of the way, aim his gun, fire the gun, then track the vehicle and continue firing on the decedent, Renee Good. Okay. So for me, as applied in this actual case, it doesn't seem that it's beyond the threat detection skills of an officer or a law enforcement officer, ICE agent, whatever, to assess that the risk had changed, even assuming the first bullet were justified. And again, there's, I think, a desire from both the left and the right commenter in this issue to try to short circuit the question, right? To try to find some easy solution that resolves it in the case of one side or the other. People will say, oh, well, the ICE agents didn't have authority to make a stop or detain them. I'm not sure that's true, A. And even if it is true that it resolves the use of force question. On the other side, they try to claim, well, she was doing something illegal. Well, I don't think that that's dispositive either. Presumably, we're using these Supreme Court principles regarding use of force in the context of an already assumed fleeing suspect, okay? And so don't let this become a question of, is she a good person? Is he necessarily a good person? Unless you're going by a theory of like he intended to provoke, right? Like this is the theory that he wanted to stay in front of the vehicle so as to have a rationale to kill this person. I haven't really touched that as much, but other people have. Then I think it might be relevant, his background and what he wanted to do, right? A theory of provocation. But don't let this be an inquiry as to whether or not he's hit, okay? Or whether or not she's a good person, or whether or not he's a good person, if you're just running the straight up self-defense analysis. You shouldn't do that. I maintain, even if he were hit, it's not justified, okay? The hit question is kind of like a side political posturing point, which is the last desperate attempt by the Trump administration to justify their lies, right? Their lies in the immediate aftermath of the news of the shooting, that he was run over, that he tried to run over, okay? If it turns out definitively that he suffered internal bruising, again, that's not the inquiry. Don't let your inquiry be shifted by bad faith hacks and actors who are trying to make this into something it's not, and focus in on the use of force. I want to talk real quick about the debate I had with Chud Logic. So we had this argument. It's really less of a debate and more of posturing. You know, I might do some video reacts with Chud in the future. I don't know if I'll call it a show or anything. Similar to what I do with Connor. I don't know that I want to commit to any like regular show on a consistent schedule other than Lib and Learn. And by the way, you should all watch us on Lib and Learn on Mondays. I might need to change the day though. Just heads up. This is the first you're hearing it if you're one of my co-hosts. But I am not impressed in the slightest with what Chud Logic, this YouTuber who I had the conversation with, brought to the table. And I just put the video up on my channel. Notice the huge disparity in the conversation we just had and the one that Chud had, right? Chud was trying desperately to quiz me on different principles of law, oftentimes falling flat on his face. Chud was desperately trying to interrupt me and prevent my point from coming across. Now, I do tactical interruptions, okay? But when I do interruptions, it's not to frustrate the conversation. I promise you. It is to stop rambling and to focus our inquiry. But what Chud was doing was interrupting to be like, you're graped, you're graped, you're graped. To say nothing of the fact that he immediately like demonetized that video by saying grape as much as he did, right? Whatever. It didn't cause my channel to be fucked up or anything. It just makes the conversation impossible. And I don't know who it impresses to say, you're graped, you're graped, you're graped. And to not have any structure to our analysis. That's obviously preposterous. And then the number of times where he made preposterous claims, some which were kind of repeated, sort of repeated by some of the lawyers on the panel we just had. This notion that not every bullet needs to be justified. Not true. I'm not implying that every bullet needs to be hermetically sealed from the other bullets and sort of identified independently of the entire causal chain. That's not what I'm saying. But it is the case that under the case law that was cited by Chud Logic and indeed by Nick Rekieta in the previous stream, namely Plumhoff, that every shot needs to be justified. It just so happens in the case of Plumhoff that they were, right? All those shots were reasonable. So it's not that they're not analyzing the shots. It's that they're analyzing them and rendering the decision as to them as reasonable, okay? So that's a very key distinction. It's another example of conservatives and MAGA people trying to short circuit the inquiry. Was he hit or not? Okay, if he's hit, justified. That's not the inquiry, right? In the short circuit of, well, if the first is justified, then the other are justified. That's the kind of like excuse not to think, an excuse not to apply a critical lens, not to hermetically seal each bullet as though we're in bullet time and this is all done like at 0.25 speed. That's not what I'm claiming. No one should claim that, right? And I don't think really that many people are claiming it. It's just to say merely that every shot does need to be justified. It's possible the same threat justifies all the shots, but they all need to be analyzed. So Chud comes in with that as his initial take, okay? Now, that is not a good faith way to try to start a conversation. What he's trying to do is basically say, I don't know my shit. He knows better because he found a specific contradiction in the law, which wasn't a contradiction at all, which proved my point. But it shows that what he's trying to have is not a conversation. Thank you so much, Josiah. Love the hat. And speaking of murder, thank you so much, Josiah. Shout out Josiah, Pondering Politics. Just had a raid from Majority Report. I'm sure a lot of people who enjoy Majority Report also enjoy Pondering Politics. Josiah, good friend of the show and former co-host on Lib and Learn, but he's a co-host at heart. Someone who comes into a conversation trying to get to a specific contradiction based on a tweet someone else did, it means that what they're doing, Their purpose of the conversation isn't specifically to come to some sort of shared understanding, but it's to find some area of specific contradiction to undermine me as a person. Okay. And again, I take it in good stride. I don't really like take it against Chud. He has to use all the tactics he wants. Apparently he was desperately researching and trying to like prepare himself for the discussion. It didn't really serve him that well, but I'll just notice the framing there. And when I'm initially explaining why his point actually proves me, he's like, you're stuttering. Dude, I was sick. And yeah, I'm trying not to like cough as I'm talking. And no, sometimes I do stutter, right? That I think people will take a look at the conduct of me and say that I'm being bad faith sometimes when I ask these questions about possibility and probability. But I promise you that I am doing things in good faith to try to like elucidate meaning, to try to get to an understanding. But being like, oh, you lost, you stuttered, mate, you stuttered. I know it was good memes and shit, but just to give you a sense of like the kind of desperation I was detecting. Another desperation is this, the gram factors, mate, the gram factors, right? The Supreme Court has admonished and told us that it's not this mechanical test. It's not factor 1, factor 2, factor 3. If you succeed on all of them, XYZ, right? Thank you from the South Side. Chud came across as someone who knew he was cooked, had to rely on theatrics. He's insecure. And obviously, in a totality of circumstances inquiry, we would look to those factors. We would look to the threat of the officer. We look to what the severity of the crime, you know, the conditions of what's happening. So yeah, but the focus there wasn't on, oh yeah, obviously like this is super relevant and we agree on that. It's, do you know the ground factors, mate? The ground factors. Josiah says, did you see your buddy Will Chamberlain recently on Piers Morgan defend the shooting? Piers Morgan blocked me. He's not the only one who's blocked me. Additionally, we have, as I mentioned in the debate, Nicholas Diorio blocked me. I don't know why he did that. Jack Posobiec blocked me. I just found out that Dan Bongino blocked me. So a lot of these clowns that go on and have these insane positions, whether it's on this or Kilmar Abrego Garcia or Mahmoud Khalil, they don't actually want a tough conversation. I will say kudos to Chud. I think it was 10 out of 10 content. I really appreciated it. That's why I published it. I had a lot of fun. I'm not trying to say that I'm not having fun with Chud and that we don't have a good rapport. I think we did have a good rapport. And I appreciate that he did have the conversation. I thought it was like very funny. I am just noting the weakness and fragility in the guardrails of his position. And that weakness is evident in some of the tactics that he attempted to do during the course of the debate, including these kinds of like, and this is what people falsely accuse me of doing, right? They accuse me of going and trying to find some like minutia disagreement and like just wrecking someone on a minutia disagreement when that's not what I was trying to do at all. And then finally, his desperation as I was making the point that I started this entire like monologue with about objective reasonableness and the use of force having no tendency in the case, he was doing anything in his power, including straight up like reading paragraphs of Justice Kavanaugh's concurrence in the Barnes v. Felix decision to try to distract me from ultimately resolving that point, which I did. And when he hilariously said, yeah, nothing could have stopped it definitively, bro, which by which he means the officer could have taken no action. He accepted this framing in the moment to prevent the threat, which purportedly justifies the shooting. When he let that slip, it was even more hilarious because he was resisting it for so long until finally it came out and he was spent, man. So yeah, I think that debate shows that a lot of people with very strong opinions on this, accusing me of having a political bias, I think don't fare up so well when the conversation happens. And then a broader point on criticisms towards me about how I behave in debates. The reason why a lot of these debates get bogged down isn't because I'm asking questions, okay? It's because people fail to answer them. We spent the entirety of like the first part of that conversation answering Chud's question as an accusation. When people ask me questions, I will qualify when I need to, when I feel I have to, but I will endeavor to answer them. But there's so much resistance in some of the conversations that I've had recently to just answering the question. And that's why we didn't really get that far in the conversation, right? It was like 2.5 hours where he couldn't even grant that the use of force needs to be justified whenever it's applied. And instead it's, oh, you brought up Watchmen, mate. You brought up Watchmen, right? You brought up movies. You know you're great. You know it. You're laughing. That's why you're laughing, right? I know good memes, but like the conversation is stopped because of him. Conversation didn't go very far because of him. Okay? And in this conversation too, I think there was much more willingness to concede from both sides, and me as well, and to give points and all that stuff and give ground. But even here, there was like a little bit of resistance. And frankly, I blame Ryan a little bit for this at the start of it. Like, there is no one who will bog us down in like irrelevant stuff rather than Ryan, or to like change the inquiry, get us out of the very specific thing that we're considering than Ryan. You know? And it really becomes difficult. And at some point it feels intentional. It feels like what we're trying to do here is prevent anyone from getting a point across. Other things I want to talk about. I did a Crystal and Kyle segment yesterday morning. I think they're going to be releasing clips of it. I thought it was a wonderful conversation, to be honest. I mean, just I when it comes to like the corruption stuff of the government and the abuses of power and the rights conversation, they just get it, man. And I know that a lot of my audience, more lib audience, we have our disagreements with members who are more like left than us, okay? But it just seems so clear to me that they understand the nature of the threat, the nature of what is happening, and like look around us at what's happening with ICE, what's happening with our rights deprivations, what's happening internationally, and don't be fooled that international intervention doesn't bear on constitutional processes that exist in this country and that are worth defending. Okay, if it's the case that Trump can just usurp the Constitution in the context of declaring war, what do you think that that's going to do to your civil liberties at home? There's this phrase, in times of war, the law goes silent. Okay? Think about the abuses that happened during the Cold War, the abuses that happened during the Iraq and Afghanistan war when it comes to civil liberties. All right? Like, this is all related to you in your home, in your country. Don't think that it's not. Separate and apart from the separation of powers concerns, the structural concerns, separate from all of that, it's intimately linked. And don't just think, well, it's Venezuela, it's Iran, who gives a shit? It's Greenland. It bears on your country standing internationally. It bears on the structure of your government, whether we live in a republic or not. And it could very well bear on the use of authority by the government. He's shown he's willing to deploy the military in our cities when there's no state of war. Imagine that there were an actual state of war just because Trump decides so, because Congress hasn't taken the opportunity to try to stop him in some respect. These are all linked, okay? It's all connected. It's part of a broader push on the administration to centralize authority. That's why the cases that we focus on them so hard. The Mahmoud Khalil case isn't about Mahmoud Khalil. It's about you and it's about me. It's about the power of the government to detain people on the basis of First Amendment violations. It's on the power of the court to hear different situations involving controversies between the government and individuals, because in every stage of these proceedings, Trump is trying to argue that what they're doing is unreviewable or that they're owed infinite discretion. And that language starts to drip down towards not just Trump's decisions, but to anyone in the executive branch. You hear it and we talk about this in the Crystal and Kyle segment, when they talk about absolute immunity for ICE officers, okay? Thank you so much, Vasraka. In the athlete case, Kagan implied there's a question regarding the nature or existence of as-applied equal protection challenges. I would have to hear the oral arguments. I can give you my take on that, Vasraka, in a second, but I appreciate the super chat. I'll give you my take at the end of this monologue. Where was I? Oh my God. Oh, Mahmoud Khalil case. Yeah. So at every opportunity, they're trying to say it's unreviewable. And recently, I think it's the Second Circuit Court of Appeals or Third Circuit Court of Appeals in the Mahmoud Khalil case, they might decide to review en banc, which means the broader collection of appellate judges on the Third Circuit. They ruled that a habeas petition, Mahmoud Khalil's habeas petition, like there was not subject jurisdiction on the specific things ruled on by the district court in that case. And these are important issues like the National Guard ones. The court's ability to hear these claims or to determine like whether or not we can even decide situations. These bear not just in the immigration context, but on your context as well. The specific holding in the Mahmoud Khalil case, yes, that is just for immigration, but the broader point about the administration pushing to eliminate judicial review of their actions. What do you think that this CASA decision was about with respect to universal injunctions? People who try to hermetically seal analyses from the political perspective, people like Ryan, and just get lost in the forest instead of looking at the trees. That's the saying, right? They're doing you a disservice. They all need to be viewed in context. And that is another reason why this birthright citizenship debate was such a raffle stomp against Ryan. I mean, the dude just, people will get the impression from him, the conservatives who already agreed with his position, that, oh, he said history a bunch, and he said that Pisco banged the table, and therefore Ryan won. No, I'm like, no, the dude has no theory, and hopefully we'll see Wick debate him too. So I'm told that that's good memes. The reason I chose at the end of this debate to cast the issue of birthright citizenship in terms of conservatives, in terms of the effect it could have on you, right? Well, if we understand subject to the jurisdiction thereof, this phrase, this controversial phrase located within the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause, if we understand that to be just political allegiance, what does that mean about the future? Does that mean that Congress can define political allegiance in political terms? That would seem to follow, right? And does that mean basically that the 14th Amendment is sort of dead letter? What does it do except say, well, Congress can do what it wants? Well, Congress could already make rules of naturalization under Article 1. So all of these different issues, the issues of the news agencies, CBS, the mergers, the law firms, right? You might think, oh, who cares about these white shoe law firms and their clearances, right? Who cares about the billable hours of these white shoe law firms? No. It's not about that. It's about sending a message, right? It's about the precedent. What use are your rights without someone to invoke them in a court of law, right? It's necessary to have the protection of a right that it be like possible to invoke it. That's why due process is critical. If you have a massive hole in due process, you can't invoke your rights. And if you have no access to lawyers who are able to push back against the administration without losing their ability to practice, then you don't have any rights in practical cases either. Because then you're basically forcing individuals to exist in an environment where lawyers are able to be lawfully pressured by the executive government into doing their bidding and not representing certain clients. And so, and even again, the universities, no one has much love for Harvard administrators, etc., or no one has much love for Jimmy Kimmel, let's say, although I stand Jimmy, we believe in Jimmy. But it's about the broader institutional power. It's about the fact that the rights that we have, the value in protecting those rights doesn't come from the recognition of the rights in and of themselves. Where does that value come from? Where does the protection actually come from? It comes from the prevention of the separation of the unifying of central power, preventing that. Because you can say all you want, right? And this administration does it. You can claim to be protecting rights up and down. You can even write a new Bill of Rights. You can say whatever you want. But if the decision on whether to respect those rights are in the hands of one person or one cabal, then what good are they? You see this, by the way, with Elon Musk as well. He promises X is going to be a place for free speech. But the moment it's inconvenient for him, or the moment he wants to make some sort of arbitrary rule that you can't say cis, or that you can't put out public information about his locations, right? Then all of a sudden the rights that he cares to profess are meaningless, utterly meaningless. It's the structure of our country that is most important in protecting our rights. Absolutely. I'm 100% convinced of that. And that's why all of these abuses are so important for you to fight against. And I'm not happy with the minority leader Schumer, not because I hate Democrats. I don't hate Democrats. I want Democrats to win, because I think that you should be fighting on every fucking ground. Everywhere. Yes on ICE. Abolish ICE. And there's a perfectly good U.S. citizen-minded explanation for it. We have to abolish ICE because ICE is badly trained. ICE is rotten. ICE is abusing American rights. And we'll have to shift enforcement elsewhere. Be a thought leader. Take a risk. And that includes now legislative leaders. Yes, that includes them. That's why I criticize them, not because I hate them, because I want them to do better, fundamentally. And they have the potential to do that. We have the potential to win Alaska. We can do it. Head in the polls. Longtime Chud fan, I'm watching like you too. He should have let this guard down. Chat, love your look. Told Chud. No, yeah, I don't say this to shit on Chud, all right? Okay? I had a lot of fun too. And it was good vibes all around. It was good vibes all around. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it like it is frustrating to be painted as a bad faith hack who doesn't care about his arguments, either in this context or, I don't know, the H3 lawsuit or the global entry thing. But also by, a sensible liberal, I guess he's a liberal, on issues where anti-Trumpism, anti-conservatism seems to be on my side, right? So it's not just in instances in which I'm supporting more lefties. It's instances where I'm supporting like blue liberal positions, which are the majority positions in the country now, according to public polling. So it's it's a fight. It's an out and out fight that we need to win. Peacefully, patriotically, all that, yeah. But it absolutely is like all hands on deck type of moment. And I really, really, really care about the issues. And I know that you guys do too. And I know that, and I continue to say that if you have disagreements with me substantively, if you have disagreements with how I approach conversations, I'm all ears. Discord's open. I encourage you to go to Discord. But I do actually care about this stuff. And I think that I want Democrats to, and a lot of them are, get the message about the state of our country. And it's present in all of these different scenarios that we talk about. So with that said, any questions? Monologue over. Oh, the first one was about as applied versus facial challenge. So what did he say here? Kagan applied, there's a question regarding the nature or existence of as applied equal protection challenge. Right. So think about the following, right? A law that says anyone who doesn't qualify for the permitting rules cannot own or cannot legally operate like a laundry store or something, a laundromat, right? Now, on the face of that law, suppose that's a law, that's a rule, whatever. On the face of it, you're like, well, that's kind of like a neutral law of general applicability. Okay? And you're like, well, where's the equal protection challenge? I thought an equal protection challenge is for suspect classifications. So the law is facially neutral. So how can there be an equal protection issue there? Well, if you have a law that just gives maximum deference to an executive to enforce whatever permitting standards are implied by this hypothetical law and there is a case that I'm kind of like alluding to. I think it's called a Yick-Woe. Yick-Woe is the case. If there is a law that is neutrally, like facially neutral, but is just applied in a highly discriminatory manner, there can still be equal protection challenge that arises. And even on some of these laws, which are targeted to specific groups that are arguably suspect classifications under equal protection frameworks or under Title IX or whatever, you can think of scenarios in which, okay, in the main run of cases, on average, there will be a burden and the government will be able to meet it. But that doesn't mean necessarily they can meet it in every case. And so a facial challenge is saying the whole law is invalid. It violates the Constitution. And an as applied one is the application of this law in this case is unconstitutional. So those are the differences generally. I'm guessing that that's not what you're asking, and it's a more kind of nuanced question regarding what Kagan was talking about vis-a-vis Title IX or the law from the various states, but not having the benefit of having read all the briefs and having listened to the oral arguments, I don't think I can be more specific than that. Okay. Any other questions? Please have a debate with someone to discuss the overall enabling of fascism by the Renee case, not only law. Yeah, happy to do that too at some point. Oftentimes these conversations get very like limited in virtue of their like the moderation style or like how much time people have. But you know me, I'm willing to have this conversation as long as possible. Owlish says, I have no desire to abolish ICE. I have desire to find the agents breaking the law and have them prosecuted. Yeah, it's just not clear that that except for the agents who are violating criminal law that many of these policies, which are illegal, would lead to like causes of action against those officers, maybe to fire them. But I do have a desire to abolish ICE now. I think that's a political objective that we should take. And it's for the reasons I state. Mantis says, respect and value your opinion, Pisco. Thanks for streaming. Sorry, I'm a brokey post holiday. No, thank you so much for the super chat. I super duper appreciate it. Thank you so much. I am coming off of my sickness pretty well, all things considered. This was a rough week, but I still soldiered on in like multiple different things, right? I did right after Word War debate. I analyzed the debate in a previous stream. Then we did the Chud thing. What did I do yesterday? I might not have done anything yesterday. Oh no, yesterday I did the Crystal and Kyle. You just haven't seen it yet. And then today I did this thing. So I'm proud of myself for soldiering on and doing content even when I was not feeling great. But I haven't streamed as much. But please follow the channel, and you'll see when I go live and stuff. Trying to be more regular about stuff. But yeah, that's anything else. Let me think. Let me just think real quick before I send you off. Next time I stream, I'm gonna analyze this lawsuit by Mark Kelly and the lawsuit from Minnesota against the federal government. These are civil lawsuits, but I think it's important. I'll pre-read them so as not to bore you all. And then it looks like we're doing, oh yeah, the thing on Wick. Yeah, the everyone against Pisco as well. It looks like the Drew debate is gonna happen. I'm not gonna explain what it is because it's just like this dude pisses me off sometimes. But it might happen sooner than you think, and it might be in person. So just heads up on that. Drew Pavlu. So just heads up on that. What else? Please, if you're interested, maybe if I have time tonight, I can field questions and do like a little mini like open question time if you want, like call-ins and shit. If you want to do that, join the Discord at the P-Squad. There should be links everywhere. And happy to thank you, Ben Riley, so much. They were just arguing if doing what the officer did, but to a conductor to stop a train was reasonable. Yeah, like this is, and maybe I should use that example going, that's a smart example. The train example, yeah. I'm reading through federal codes of regulations. ICE agents are not being properly trained, so they cannot carry out duties as specified. I think that the policies are relevant insofar as they inform what an objectively reasonable officer would know and would do in response to a threat. And so I never want to be heard to say that the policy is coextensive with the law. And again, the very easy just head check on that is imagine that they promulgate some insane policy from Christy Nome, right? We're not going to say, oh, just because it's the policy, mate, therefore it's legal. But it does inform what an objectively reasonable officer would think is justified in the given circumstance. And yeah, so I think that train example is great. And the policies, you should bring up policies. You should bring up the fact that of training, right? And you should bring up the fact that none of the other cops drew their pistols. Those are like pretty good facts in favor of, as well as physics and inertia, why shooting in that context wouldn't produce the results of preventing the kind of claimed harm. And then an objectively reasonable person would know that. How can I say, oh, I'll look at you, Sock, for the quarantine stuff. Everyone gets quarantined when they join for reasons. So it's not like a you specific thing, but I'll make sure to unquarantine you. Guys, I love you all very much. I really do appreciate the support. Great viewership, great support. Thank you so much for the raid from Majority Report. I really do. I'm oftentimes floored by the amount of engagement on all my videos. Like I don't always have the highest views on the prepared videos or the segmented videos, but the engagement seems high, like high comments relative to views, high like relative to views. And so I don't bot or anything. I feel like I've cultivated a group of people who care about the issues and who are engaged. And I always appreciate that. Even when there's massive disagreements, I will always appreciate you guys, saying what your views are in the comments and providing your feedback, etc. I don't always I'm not able to read all the DMs. I'm way behind on responding to DMs, but I do appreciate it. And guys, I love you all very much. I'm going to head out and just rest a little bit more. I feel like I'm close to getting over the cold / flu / COVID, whatever this was. And I just want to say how much I appreciate y'all watching today's stream. But that's where we'll end, and more to come soon. And I'll see you soon.